Hi guys, welcome to Midnight Anime Library. I summoned the 8 demons and the world government panicked. One Piece Part 5 Chapter 81. This is simply a monster. No. It's like a demon. Heaven and earth shattered. The moment Shanks unleashed this move, the seawater next to the island surged wildly. Waves rose and crashed, pouring back onto the island. The pirates near the island now looked upon this terrifying slash. They were utterly terrified. Run! Finally, someone reacted and let out a loud howl. Some pirates who hadn't fallen yet fled frantically. They knew if they stayed any longer, there would be only one outcome. Death. Absolute death. The energy burst forth from this sword aura, even just the residual shockwave, was absolutely something they couldn't withstand. Even the crew members of the Red Hair pirate ship constricted their pupils and rapidly retreated when their captain swung that sword. Although this attack wasn't aimed at them, the spreading energy was still troublesome. Only Hawkeye was drawn in by this sword aura. This was a move he had never witnessed, even during his duels with Shanks. As the world's strongest swordsman, seeing this sight stirred up his fighting spirit. It wasn't fear, but excitement. Just how much power could a strike coated in Hoshiku coating unleash? At the same time, he was curious. How would Roxio receive this technique? At this moment, in his line of sight, Roxio stood in the strong wind, the sword aura already upon him. The speed was so fast it seemed to tear through space. There was no avoiding it. So this is Kamosari. Roxio's heart sank as he muttered. His aura suddenly soared. Unbeatable confidence surged within his chest. The Ox Talisman was fully activated. All the strength in his body converged onto his 4 limbs. His legs felt like they were filled with heavy lead. The earth beneath his feet cracked layer by layer. Layers of fine gravel were directly blasted and suspended in midair. A terrifying, mountain-like energy manifested in his fists. Simultaneously, the power of the Dragon Talisman erupted. The power of his primary talisman, carrying explosive flames, appeared on his palms. The steaming flames, like heat waves, hovered in his palms. Then, under the constantly stimulated talisman magic power, they grew larger and larger. In just half a breath, the flames transformed into a gigantic fireball. Its temperature was so high, it was as if the sun from the heavens had been plucked down. His legs bent slightly, and his sharp, profound eyes stared fixedly at the terrifying sword aura pressing down. Just as the sword aura was about to descend, Roxio suddenly exerted force, and Haki swept out, winding and circling. Within dozens of meters, air currents jumped. Boundless power gathered towards his fists. The huge fireball in his palm, receiving the guidance, shot out instantly like an arrow. Whoosh! The fireball left his palm and burst towards the sword aura. Boom! A massive explosion suddenly appeared. The sound, no less than a giant cannonball being detonated, was deafening, spreading outward from the island, audible even dozens of kilometers away. Some unsuspecting pirates, along with Marines stationed at the branch base, all looked towards the island. They frowned, unsure what was happening there, but the terrifying sound made it clear that something major must have occurred. And at this moment, after the great noise, came the outpouring of energy. The entire small island trembled, like a frightened child, utterly helpless. The sword aura, dimmed significantly by the obstruction of the exploding fireball, was still fierce, cutting straight and true toward Roxio. However, right as the fireball collided with Kamosari, Roxio stomped hard on the ground with both legs. Boom! His body shot out like a cannonball. A pit tens of meters in diameter appeared where he stood, and spiderweb-like cracks continuously spread outward. Roxio's fists bulged, his muscles towering. His upper body was exposed, and the energy contained within was terrifyingly vast. Following his heartbeat, his thick chest rose and fell deeply. His entire being was utterly murderous in the air. Cold, sharp, like a supreme-grade great sword. Feeling the tumultuous sword aura rushing toward him, Roxio slightly twisted his neck. Concentrating his breath, he slightly bent his body. He clenched both hands into fists and brought them together. The knotted muscles on his arms stood out inch by inch. In the very next instant, he smashed them fiercely down onto the sword aura. Boom, boom, boom. Thud, thud, thud. In midair, Roxio, with his monster-like physique, acted like a machine, relentlessly punching the sword aura. With every punch he landed, the sword aura diminished slightly. The vibrating air currents scattered, shooting out in all directions, as black and red blades sliced into the seawater and the earth, bringing forth bursts of explosive energy. Blood covered Roxio's fists, but he showed no intention of stopping. The power of the Ox Talisman was pushed to its limit. Explosive sounds continuously rang in his ears. Finally, after an unknown number of punches, the sword aura, wrapped in Hashiko Haki coating, could no longer hold up. Crack! Fine cracks appeared on the black and red slash. The sound was crisp, like breaking glass. Then, the sound grew louder and louder. The cracks rapidly expanded, shattering inch by inch. This move, Kamasari, passed down from Roger and unleashed by a top-tier hockey user, was instantly torn to shreds. In midair, the moment the sword aura shattered, the violent energy surged in all directions. This space was filled with terrifying energy. The seawater rapidly poured in, and the island began to collapse. But compared to that, Shanks's heart was even more turbulent at this moment. Kamasari was actually torn apart. A rare expression of shock appeared on his face. His eyes looked at Roxio, who was covered in blood, as if he wasn't seeing a youth, but a demon crawling out of hell. He knew that, having fought this far, he had no more options. Even Kamasari couldn't defeat Roxio, being forcibly shredded by him. How else could he possibly defeat him? Moreover, Roxio looked heavily injured right now, but Shanks understood that with his monster-like physique, he would recover quickly. Conversely, looking at himself, his internal energy was churning, and although he had no obvious wounds, a hint of sweetness rose in his throat during the clash with Roxio. A high-intensity battle was rapidly draining his stamina. One was an unkillable monster, the other's stamina was gradually running out as the battle continued. If this fight went on, the loser would definitely be himself. Shanks shook his head and exhaled. I lost. Surprisingly, he didn't feel much disappointment, accepting it readily. Roxio's strength far exceeded his imagination. If he lost to someone like Captain Roger, perhaps there was nothing to be sad about. Thinking of this, Shanks returned the griffin in his hand to his waist. However, just then, Hawkeye, who had been watching the show, suddenly increased his aura and launched an attack. His figure was like a bolt of lightning. Even though he knew Shanks disliked others interfering during a fight, he absolutely had to fight Roxio. Chapter 82, Awakening the Talamask. Roxio tore through the sword energy, his figure landing on the ground, shaking the blood from his hands. The wounds on his fists healed under the talisman's magic. Ding! Detecting red-haired Shanks has lost the will to fight. Defeated. Congratulations, host. You have defeated a 4 emperors. Obtained 400 leadership points. Talamask unlocked. The system's voice suddenly rang out without warning. Roxio's body involuntarily froze. He had thought he would have to continue the bitter fight, beating red-haired Shanks until he couldn't get up, to claim victory. He didn't expect that making the opponent lose the will to fight also counted as a victory. Roxio! Take this! At this moment, a solemn voice suddenly interrupted his thoughts. Hawkeye stood in midair, holding a black blade taller than himself, and attacked Roxio. Roxio looked at Hawkeye, who was brimming with fighting spirit, expressionlessly. He couldn't help but frown. In the original work, Dracul Mihawk was a stoic, wasn't he? Why was he always so excited when he saw him? What was with that excited expression? He already said he wasn't interested in him. However, Roxio still gathered his momentum. The opponent had already come knocking with his sword, so even if he didn't want to fight him, he had to make a move. The next instant, a light flashed in Roxio's eyes. The dragon talisman activated, and a fireball shot towards Hawkeye. Hawkeye wielded his black blade and slashed down with a sword. The fireball exploded under the fierce sword energy slash. Then, 1, 2, 3, a multitude of fireballs rained down on Hawkeye, covering the sky. Hawkeye's expression suddenly changed as he looked at the exploding flames. This thing wasn't so easy to handle. Hawkeye's figure had to retreat to the ground, dodging the falling fireballs, his black blade Yoro continuously swinging, sending out streaks of sword energy. Boom, boom, boom. Explosions continuously echoed on the island, violent energy ravaged the land, and traces of spreading fire were everywhere. The scorched smell in the air grew thicker. The seawater surged in wildly, pouring into the island. Finally, after half a day of destruction by Roxio and red-haired Shanks, coupled with Roxio's fierce firepower, this desolate island could no longer hold on. Run! The island, it's sinking. Someone suddenly shouted. Everyone was shocked by the news. Get on board, let's get out of here. Red-haired Shanks was the first to react, leaping lightly to land in front of Ben Beckman and the others. Hawkeye's sharp gaze swept over Roxio, then he reluctantly put his black blade back behind his back. His body shot towards the Fortune like a cannonball. Roxio! There will be a fight between us. Hawkeye left these words. Roxio smiled non-committally at his words. Dracule my hawk. Defeat red-haired Shanks first. You're not worthy of me making a move yet. With that said, he stepped into the sea, his legs pushing off, the rabbit talisman's power activated, and he shot out like an arrow. His goal had been achieved, the island was sinking. There was no need to stay. In the blink of an eye, he disappeared from the area. Hawkeye stood on the deck of the Fortune, watching Roxio leave, his eyes flickering. Roxio's last words still echoed in his ears. As the world's strongest swordsman, such words had always come from his own mouth. And now, he had become the one deemed unworthy by someone else. 2 words, arrogant. A rookie pirate telling the world's strongest swordsman that he wasn't even worthy of him making a move. More importantly, the other party had no way to deal with it. Such a thing, no matter where it happened, would be enough to make people's jaws drop. But Hawkeye understood that Roxia had the capital to be arrogant. Because the battle just now had already shown everything, even if he himself were to face Roxio, the outcome of the battle would be no different from red-haired Shanks. But even so, Hawkeye still yearned for a battle. For him, the world's strongest swordsman, the outcome of winning or losing was actually not important. The process was. Only in life and death battles could he discover his shortcomings, make up for them, and advance further in the way of the sword. Such a powerful rookie is truly unsettling. Red-haired Shanks couldn't help but sigh as he looked in the direction Roxio had left. The surging emotions in his heart slowly calmed down. Roxio had left, but the memory he left red-haired Shanks was firmly etched in his heart. Hawkeye agreed with him, the Marine will start getting headaches again. He paused, then looked at red-haired Shanks. This should be a cause for celebration for us pirates, shouldn't it? Red Hair, however, sighed, shaking his head. I'm afraid this world is about to descend into chaos. Although he was a pirate, he didn't like wealth or slaughter. Compared to a chaotic world, Red Hair had always cared more about world peace. But from his recent battle with Roxio, he saw an aura in this rookie that wanted to overturn the world government. Hawkeye understood red-haired Shanks' meaning, but he didn't care. Such matters should be left for the world government to worry about. I'm off to study swordsmanship. When I defeat Roxio, I'll come and drink with you again. Hawkeye took out his coffin-shaped small sailboat, jumped on it, and bid farewell to red-haired Shanks. He sailed away from the Red Hair pirates. Red Hair nodded in acknowledgement. After a while, he turned to Ben Beckman and the others and said, set sail, head to Mary Geos. Meanwhile, the news of Roxio's battle with the 4 emperors Red Hair spread continuously like a plague among other forces in the New World. New World. Whitebeard pirates. Whitebeard, one of the 4 emperors, sat on the deck sofa as usual, with bottles and jars of medicine hanging around him. However, one thing was different from before. He was currently holding a photograph. It showed Roxio on the celestial dragon's ship. Garararara. This Roxyu is always full of surprises. Whitebird's body shook with laughter, feeling that this kid Roxyu was increasingly to his liking. He had felt a bit regretful when he heard that Roxyu had been captured by Marineford. But this photo proved that it was just a rumor. Moreover, Roxyu actually killed a celestial dragon. This was very rare in this new era of the Great Pirate Era. It made Whitebeard recall his time as a captain in the Rocks Pirates. In the age of extreme pirates, the first thought upon seeing a celestial dragon was to kill them. Pops, what's making you so happy? Diamond Jozu asked, puzzled. In his memory, Pops hadn't been this happy in a long time. Not only Jozu was curious, but others drinking on the deck also expressed the same sentiment. Do you remember Roxyu from before? Whitebeard said slowly. Roxyu, huh? That rookie who defeated Marine Admiral Kizaru. He seemed to have been captured by the Marine, right? Why is Pops suddenly bringing him up? Chapter 83, If only I could invite him to be my son. Of course, the crew members knew him, as his rise was too rapid. Similarly, his fall was also swift. But they were somewhat puzzled. What kind of person was their old man? The strongest man in the world. Even if Roxyu was very powerful, there was no need to pay so much attention to him. Garararara. My dear sons. He wasn't captured by the Marine. Whitebeard waved his large hand, and a photo of Roxyu was flung into the air, lightly landing on the deck. Jozu the Diamond, Vista the Flower Sword, and the other commanders looked at the photo upon hearing this. Their expressions changed drastically, and their pupils constricted. It was just a photo, but it contained a wealth of information, constantly challenging their understanding. Silence. An eerie silence. For a moment, the deck was utterly silent. Only the gurgling sound of Whitebird's ford drip could be heard. This must be fake. After a long while, someone finally recovered and said in disbelief. After all, these events were too shocking. Roxyu, who was about to be publicly executed, actually appeared on the red line and even killed a celestial dragon. This was even more infuriating to the Marine than killing a Marine. My dear sons. In the Great Pirate Era, nothing is impossible. A remarkable kid has emerged on the seas. You all need to work hard too. Whitebeard said. Moreover, he seems to be heading to the New World. Perhaps there will be a chance to meet. Hearing this, the expressions of many crew members froze. Roxyu killed a celestial dragon and still has a chance to come to the New World? He's probably going to be wanted by the world government. However, they still unconsciously clenched their fists. Especially Jozu the Diamond and the other commanders, their eyes filled with fighting spirit. Roxyu. This rookie pirate, no matter what his future holds. At this moment, he had become a target they wanted to defeat. And just then, a phoenix cry suddenly erupted on the deck. A flaming phoenix bird streaked across the sea with brilliant light, landing in front of Whitebeard. Marco! Is there more news? Whitebeard looked up at his second commander and asked with a smile. Roxyu. He should be in the New World now. Knowing that Roxyu wasn't captured by the Marine, Whitebeard was now very concerned about his movements. If there was a chance, he would really like to invite Roxyu to be his son. Meanwhile, on the other side, Roxyu, who was rushing towards the calm belt, sneezed for no reason, rubbed his nose, and muttered to himself, "Damn it, someone's cursing me, you old man." Latest news. Roxyu did appear in the New World. Marco looked at his old man, swallowed, and said. He also encountered the red hair pirates. And Roxyu and Shanks exchanged blows. He paused here. Whitebeard leaned forward slightly, somewhat surprised, stroking his chin and saying, he actually fought Shanks. With Shanks' strength, Roxyu must have learned a lesson, he murmured. He was well aware of the strength of Shanks, one of the four emperors. Defeating the current Roxyu was not difficult. But soon, he thought of something, and his brows couldn't help but furrow. Roxio wouldn't have become a crew member of the Red Hair Pirates after being defeated by Shanks, would he? It was common knowledge that Roxio had no faction on the sea. This was also why he felt he could invite Roxio to be a crew member. But, with Roxio and Red Hair fighting, it seemed his plans might be interfered with. Did Roxio become a crew member of the Red Hair Pirates? Whitebeard asked with a booming voice. Marco didn't know his old man's thoughts and was a little confused. He paused here, just wanting to adjust his emotions, as the following words were truly incredible. After calming down, Marco continued. Roxio did not become a Red Hair Pirate crew member. They fought on an island. The two were evenly matched, but Roxio grew stronger with each clash, tearing apart sword energy with his bare hands, until the small island was sunk. Shanks was at a disadvantage. Such a scene was also unfolding in the territory of another four emperors. For Emperors Kaido's territory, Onigashima. The executives gathered to discuss the major events happening on the sea recently. Governor General. This guy Roxio has been getting increasingly out of hand recently. He's constantly stealing our thunder. Below the stage. A big fat man asked in a deep voice. He could no longer even be called fat, his entire body, except for his head, had become a sphere, wearing sunglasses and purple lips. He had a golden ponytail on his head and a cigar in his mouth. This was Queen, one of the All-Stars, known as Plague because of his fondness for developing various chemical substances. Kaido held his head, remaining silent. His physique was extremely tall and burly, easily over 7 meters in height. Black hair draped over his shoulders, he had a pair of long horns resembling those of a horned dragon, a very long mustache like dragon whiskers, and a dragon scale tattoo on his left arm. His upper body was bare, with an X-shaped scar on his right abdomen. A purple jacket hung from his waist, with 2 golden chains dangling from its hem. He wore dark green baggy pants, a shimanawa around his waist, and a purple fur cloak, appearing like a demon incarnate. Just sitting there, he exuded an extremely strong sense of oppression. He had heard of Roxio's name, but hadn't paid much attention. After Roxio was captured by the Marine, he was completely forgotten. Unexpectedly, this guy suddenly reappeared, killed a celestial dragon, and was even rumored to have directly fought Shanks, one of the 4 emperors, subtly gaining the upper hand. This made it hard for him not to pay attention. I heard he used his fists to literally shatter Red Hair's sword energy. Is that true? Kaido said, his voice like a resounding bell. Yes, Governor. Roxio's physical prowess is incredibly strong. The one speaking this time was King, one of the All-Stars and the leader of the 3 disasters, known as conflagration. His bounty was 1.39 billion berries, and he was Kaido's right-hand man. He possessed extraordinary courage. In the original story, he once dared to go alone to stop the Big Mom pirates from entering Wano country. Is that so? He's truly an interesting fellow. Kaido murmured with interest. As the strongest creature in the world, when it came to physical prowess, if he claimed to be first, no one dared to claim second. Roxio's feat of tearing apart sword energy, along with his speed, strength, and self-healing ability, greatly intrigued him. Coincidentally, he had always struggled to find sufficiently strong opponents, and Roxio seemed quite promising. Moreover, Roxio was currently in the limelight, so he could perhaps humble him and boost his own reputation. Pay close attention to Roxio's movements recently. Report any news to me immediately. Chapter 84, Tiger Talisman Fusion. Calm Belt. The band-shaped region on both sides of the Grand Line. This sea area has neither wind nor currents, and the entire surface is absolutely calm. Once a sailboat enters here, it will lose power and become trapped, unable to move. For pirates, this is a dangerous sea area that is almost impossible to navigate. However, a large number of supersized sea kings live here. At this moment, on a deserted island, the corpse of a sea king was stranded on the shore, crushing swaths of trees. Its body was large enough to cover half of a small island. Beside this sea king, sat a monster slightly smaller than it. Green skin, with a unique hairstyle. It was Demon Bogard, one of the demons Roxio placed in the calm belt. In the sky, a marine-bred seagull flew over the island, leaving a cry, breaking the tranquility of the calm belt. The creatures in this world sure grow big. Bogard patted her belly and said with a smack of her lips. In this sea area, there were many supersized creatures, some of which were much larger than her. If Roxio hadn't specifically told her that these guys were just slightly larger fish and nothing special, Bogard would have thought she had come to a demon world. Slurp. She flicked her tongue. Bogard put these thoughts aside, her eyes burning as she feasted on the food before her. Her eating speed was astonishing. In a short while, a sea king larger than Bogard disappeared, transforming into magic power within Bogard's body. Her size also increased significantly. Just then, a rapidly approaching figure closed in on the small island. The next moment, with a bang, his figure landed on the island, creating a huge crater. It was Roxio, who was rushing to the calm belt. Behind him, sea kings followed. Undoubtedly, they were all attracted by the commotion Roxio caused as he swept across the sea. There were 3 in total. Each of them was much larger than Bogard. They surrounded the island, their massive pupils staring intently at Roxio and at Bogard, who had finished eating their kin. The calm belt is truly dangerous. Sea kings and such, follow me all the way. Roxio settled his body, looked at the 3 sea kings behind him, and said lightly, "Too bad, they're not the super large kind." Although he spoke of danger, Roxio's movements were not slow at all. He leaped up. Several explosive fireballs rained down. In a few swift moves, he dealt with the 3 sea kings. As for why he waited until then to act, it was naturally to give Bogard an extra meal. Thinking of this, Roxio looked at Bogard, his eyes lighting up slightly. "You've grown quite a bit. Now you look more like a demon," he said, stroking his chin. Compared to when she first appeared, Demon Bogard had grown at least 3 times in size. From the size of a medium-sized warship, she was now as massive as a Marine branch headquarters building. It seemed his idea was correct, placing Bogard here was the right decision. If she had eaten other things, she definitely wouldn't have grown so noticeably now. However, the growth rate seems to slow down over time. This is understandable, as it's impossible to maintain a constant growth rate. Everything must follow a curve that starts steep and then flattens out. Seeing Roxio arrive, Bogard chuckled, but her eyes were fixed on the 3 sea kings behind him. Roxio understood and nodded. He. Bogard wouldn't be polite. She patted her belly and walked towards the sea kings. About 10 minutes later, Bogard finished off the 3 flame-scorched sea kings, licking her lips with lingering satisfaction. Roxio raised an eyebrow, looking at Bogard, whose size had grown considerably again. The deterrent power of the giant creature surged forth. "I just don't know how strong she is." Although Bogard's size had increased greatly, Roxio honestly wasn't sure about her actual strength. After all, she had been imprisoned in hell for too long, and her strength had been continuously declining. "I need to test it myself," Roxio muttered. Thinking of this, he clenched his fists. "Bogard! I'll help you train." "Bogard?" However, before she could say anything, a fireball came smashing towards her face. The scorching temperature seemed to scorch the air. Boom! Bogard didn't even dodge. The fireball hit her massive body directly. Smoke rose everywhere, and fire blazed across the sky. When the black smoke dispersed, Bogard casually patted the spot where the fireball hit, brushing away the black ashes. Her green skin remained intact. Roxio's eyebrows twitched at the sight. For words to describe it, big and hard. The explosive fireballs unleashed by the dragon talisman would require even top masters like Hawkeye and Shanks to block with sword energy. Otherwise, a direct hit would mean death or serious injury. Yet, hitting Bogard, it didn't even break her skin. She was incredibly tough. As her size increases, her physical strength will also increase, Roxio thought to himself. In terms of physical strength alone, Bogard at this moment far surpassed him. With such physical strength, even facing admiral-level combatants, it would probably be difficult to cause her harm. Moreover, Bogard also possesses immense strength and the ability to greatly supersize herself. She truly lives up to being one of the demons. Even after being imprisoned for thousands of years and constantly weakened, she still possesses such terrifying combat power. There's no need for further testing. Roxiu put Bogard away and began to organize the results of this period on the island. Under the blessing of over 400 points of leadership value, the Tala mask in the system space, which originally only had its chin area turned red, was now entirely red. This meant that the mask was unlocked. Tala, as the supreme commander of the Shadowkan, can summon all Shadowkan warriors. In other words, Roxiu now had an army under his command. He. Now this is more like stepping on this world. Evil Roxiu muttered. Unlike that good-for-nothing, who actually got caught by the Marine. What a disgrace! During this time, news of Roxiu's capture reached his ears several times. He could tell with his toes that this wasn't fake, that Coward must have been caught. Although this incident had already become a Marine joke on the high seas due to his appearance. Roxiu was happy to see such a situation unfold. Since it was a joke, let the joke continue, he wouldn't be so kind as to save that good-for-nothing. I wonder what I'll become if he dies. Suddenly, Roxiu thought this for no reason. A bold idea arose deep within his heart. However, just then, the system's voice mercilessly interrupted his thoughts. Ding! Detecting the sixth talisman, Rooster Talisman, is about to activate. Tiger Talisman is merging. Evil Roxiu's heart skipped a beat. He reached out to the empty sky and let out a long howl. No! Chapter 85, Gorosei Meeting. Compared to Roxiu's situation, the world government was having a much harder time. Holy Land Mary Geos. Inside the enormous circular council chamber, the Gorosei sat in a circle, each wearing a grim expression. Fleet Admiral Sengoku stood beside them, his face equally unpleasant. At this moment, his feelings were complicated. Because Roxiu, who was supposed to be locked up and impelled down, had actually reappeared in the Sabaody archipelago. Moreover, he had killed the celestial dragons, the privileged nobles of the world. For the Marine, this was an extremely serious dereliction of duty. It was an utter disgrace. Since the end of the Rocks era, in all the years he had commanded the Marine, even during the Great Pirate era, he had never seen a pirate dare to publicly harm a celestial dragon. Let alone killing 3 in one go, hanging their heads on the celestial dragon's hoof, a symbol representing the entire celestial dragon populace, and parading brazenly across the sea. The intent of the provocation was equivalent to declaring war on the world government. After receiving this unbelievable news, he immediately received a summons from the Gorosei and rushed here without delay. This matter was too big. So big that even the Marine could not suppress it. Bang! Among the Gorosei, an old man with white curly hair and a black suit slammed his scepter down heavily, breaking the heavy atmosphere. He cursed angrily. You Marines are all a bunch of useless trash. I truly don't know what you spend all the funding we give you every year on. Why is there a pirate who dares to swing his butcher knife at a celestial dragon? And even dares to parade across the sea? This is an absolute disgrace. It is an extreme provocation against the world government. Due to his intense anger and exertion, the curly hair on his head shook violently. Humph. Haven't they always been like this? Incapable of success but highly capable of failure. Now even a rookie pirate can ride on the Marine's neck and defecate. An old man in a dark blue suit and a white cape snorted coldly, slamming his palm heavily onto the table. A photo of Roxiu sitting cross-legged on the celestial dragon ship was shaken into the air before floating gently down. Sengoku, this fellow named Roxiu. Why did your Marine have no intelligence on him before? Where exactly did he spring from? Is this how your Marine operates? Allowing dangerous individuals to continue growing? The blond old man wearing a dark red suit also spoke up. His voice trembled slightly with anger. A man who dared to kill celestial dragons and wipe out the direct unit CP0 certainly wouldn't be unknown. He must be a pirate who had already made a name for himself on the sea. But a pirate like this. The marine side actually took no action, allowing him to roam the sea and ultimately commit such a crime. Sengoku silently endured the Gorosei's curses, his face ashen like iron. It's not that we took no action. Roxy was previously a key target of the marine, and just a few days ago, he was jointly apprehended by the two admirals, Sakazuki and Borsellino. He was imprisoned and impelled down and scheduled for public execution 10 days from now. The bald Gorosei in the green suit couldn't help but sneer upon hearing this. Sengoku, are you joking with me? Apprehended by the marine? Scheduled for public execution 10 days from now? Are you saying the content of this photo is fake? Roxy is currently in impel down and has not committed this monstrous crime. Bringing you here was just a joke? His massive walrus mustache couldn't help but twitch violently, the anger in his heart almost solidifying. They knew about the Marine's public execution plans, but they didn't care about it. It should be said that they generally don't care about anything unless it involves the celestial dragons or the forces maintaining world balance. But now, Sengoku was claiming that Roxy, who had indeed committed the crime and appeared in plain sight, had actually been arrested long ago. And that he was the person currently imprisoned in Impel Down, scheduled for public execution. Could it be that there were two Roxy's at the same time? Does this guy know how to clone himself? Or are you talking nonsense with your eyes wide open? Is the Marine deliberately hiding something? For a moment, Sengoku didn't know how to respond. Because he also didn't know what exactly was going on. The Marine had indeed arrested Roxy, and they had recently been frantically preparing for the public execution. But this photo was also real. The person scheduled for execution reappeared. Not at Impel Down, but on the Red Line. The entire situation seemed utterly bizarre. Even the well-informed fleet admiral couldn't fully comprehend the situation. Enough. Seeing this, the remaining old man frowned, appearing slightly impatient. All of you, shut up. As his voice fell, the four old men in suits immediately retracted their hostile gazes and directed them toward the speaker. This person was wearing a white kimono. Bald, wearing round-framed glasses, he held the strongest cursed sword in the Oni Whetstone series, the first-generation Oni Whetstone. He was the only member of the Gorosei not wearing a suit. He appeared extremely mysterious. Roxy's actions are clearly a declaration of war and provocation against the world government. What we should be discussing next is how to quickly deal with him. Saying this, he laid the first-generation Oni Whetstone across his lap, his eyes sweeping over Sengoku as he spoke lukewarmly. Tell us the information you have on Roxy. His tone was indifferent. Sengoku composed himself and began to explain everything: Roxy's appearance in the East Blue, killing the Arlong pirates, killing a branch colonel, defeating Admiral Kizaru, and the possibility that the 7 great demons might be behind him. As his voice faded, the Gorosei's brows furrowed even deeper. The vast conference hall once again fell into silence. After a long while, a voice finally broke the silence. Speed comparable to Kizaru. Astonishing strength. Possesses terrifying self-healing ability. Can unleash explosive flames. Unafraid of sea stone. And one of the 8 great demons. These brief sentences echoed within the empty room. Are these reports definitely true? Sengoku nodded. Damn it. You actually don't have any information on the forces behind him? The long-bearded old man suddenly roared in anger. He abruptly stood up. If it weren't for Sengoku's status, he would have wanted to punch him out of the room. Because after listening to Sengoku's explanation, he realized that this Roxy was far more terrifying than they had imagined. Not only was his personal ability powerful, but the most crucial thing was the force hidden behind him. And the most critical point was that this so-called backing force had always been hidden in the dark. Yet the Marines, these good-for-nothing fellows, knew absolutely nothing about them. Hearing this, Sengoku really wanted to say that he had relevant information, but the truth was he didn't, so he could only shake his head helplessly. This fellow named Roxiu has grand ambitions. This incident is likely just the beginning. Chapter 86, Roxiu was very likely arrested on purpose. The speaker was the elder in kimono. The other four looked at him, understanding his meaning. But they still couldn't help but gasp. It was obvious that not only was Roxiu's strength comparable to an admiral, but he also likely had 7 other powerhouses behind him, none inferior to an admiral-level combatant. Such a terrifying organization, if brought into the open, no other force could possibly compare. One must know that even the 4 emperors, who dominated the New World, only had at most 2 admiral-level combatants. Most importantly, such a powerful organization had remained completely unheard of for so many years. If they weren't secretly plotting something, they wouldn't believe it even if you beat them to death. This Roxiu. Too dangerous. 100 times more dangerous than the 4 emperors. No. More dangerous than those rebellious revolutionary army members. He must be stifled. The golden-haired elder's face trembled as he realized the gravity of the situation, a chill rising up his spine. If, before, calling Sengoku here for this meeting was merely to deal with the matter of the celestial dragons being killed, then now, after hearing Sengoku's report, the focus of the matter had clearly shifted. Roxiu's threat was not as simple as killing a few celestial dragons. Instead, he might be plotting a grand conspiracy, very likely aiming to overthrow the world government. This was simply not comparable to those so-called pirates. Not even the Revolutionary Army. After all, at least they didn't kill celestial dragons, and they operated openly. But the power behind Roxiu was completely in the shadows. Even CP0, with its extremely outstanding intelligence capabilities, had not obtained any information. The other Gorosei members all had extremely grim expressions. So gloomy that water seemed about to drip from them. You Marines! What do you plan to do next? The elder in kimono asked, steadying his composure. Sengoku's face brightened at the words, naturally, to arrest Roxiu as soon as possible. Very good. We hope you won't disappoint us this time. Sengoku nodded heavily. If you need help during the process of capturing Roxiu, report it at any time, the elder in kimono continued. Although the marine was indeed rather useless, they were, after all, on the side of the world government. For them, it was a decent gun to use. After Sengoku left, the atmosphere in the hall once again grew heavy. The elder in kimono raised the first-generation Oni whetstone in his hand, looked towards Pango City, and after a moment of contemplation, said, "Let's go. This matter needs to be reported to Imu-sama, Pango City." Looking at the lofty Imu, hidden in the darkness, the Gorosei who had just been scolding Sengoku were now prostrating on the ground, not daring to show any disrespect. Imu-sama. Roxiu. The elder in kimono said respectfully. But please rest assured, Imu-sama, we will definitely deal with him as soon as possible and dig out the demon behind him. The other 4 also spoke up in unison. Imu-sama. Do you have any instructions? Their tone was humble to the bone. Roxiu, huh? He's an interesting newcomer. Hearing Imu-sama's evaluation, the faces of the 5 below instantly changed drastically. Imu-sama, in their hearts, was a godlike existence. For her to find someone interesting was the highest praise. However, before they could speak further, Imu's voice rang out again. You may leave. Handle things cleanly. Upon hearing this, the 5 simultaneously breathed a sigh of relief. With Imu-sama present, they feared no one. Their hearts, which had just been disturbed by Roxiu, calmed down considerably. Yes. Imu-sama. They then rose and slowly retreated. Ignoring the departing 5, Imu raised her hand and, with a void-sucking motion, drew a newspaper into her grasp. On it was a report and photo of Roxiu. Swoosh. With a thought. The newspaper was engulfed by a ball of flame, burned to ashes, and completely swallowed by the void. Marineford. Marineford. Sengoku rushed back from Mary Geos without stopping. In the spacious office, Admiral Sakazuki sat to one side. At this moment, his mood was no better than that of Fleet Admiral Sengoku. Roxio, who had already been personally captured, had inexplicably reappeared. Like an unkillable cockroach. He simply could not be understood by conventional means. Fleet Admiral. What did the Gorosei say? Akainu asked in a deep voice, knowing the Fleet Admiral had returned from Mary Geos. Sengoku's beard twitched, his face as grim as ever. Arrest Roxio, and bring him back. As he said these words, Sengoku felt like he was telling a joke. He had just interrogated Roxio at Marineford not long ago, and even put him in Impel Down, but now he had to arrest Roxio again. It was as if time and space were in disarray. Akainu's facial muscles twitched, and he let out a heavy sigh. Roxio, could there really be two of him? Given the current situation, only this conjecture could explain it. One was in Impel Down. The other was still roaming free. That's how he could kill celestial dragons outside while still being imprisoned. Sengoku stood up from his office chair, remained silent for a moment, then said, compared to that, I'm more inclined to believe that Roxio can actually enter and exit Impel Down freely. Those sea stone and chains simply can't hold him. Akainu frowned, you mean? Sengoku nodded, yes. His arrest by us was very likely intentional. Sengoku voiced his guess. To Roxius, such a thing was simply impossible. The most logical explanation was that Roxio deliberately allowed himself to be arrested by the Marine Admiral, creating a false impression of being trapped. But in the shadows, he had been arranging various matters all along. Killing celestial dragons was just the first step. Hearing Sengoku's words, Akainu's heart tightened. He suddenly remembered the scene after he and Borsellino captured Roxio. At that time, Kazara seemed to have said that Roxio was not as strong as before. Could it be that this guy really deliberately showed weakness and allowed himself to be captured? If so, then what a grand scheme he must be plotting. Just thinking about it made Akainu's heart rate spike. What did Impel Down Warden Magellan say? Akainu asked, calming his emotions. According to Magellan, no prisoner has left level 6. Sengoku said. How is this possible? Akainu was even more confused. That's why I summoned you. Sengoku slowly said, stating the purpose of summoning Akainu. You and Borsellino must personally go to Impel Down's level 6 to see if Roxio was really in there. Buru buru. Buru buru. Just as he finished speaking, the den mushi on the table suddenly rang. Hello? This is Marineford, I am Sengoku. Monsters discovered in the Calm Belt? Chapter 87, Report from Kizaru. Are you sure Roxio and Bogard were together? From the other end of the phone, the voice of a Marine Branch Rear Admiral came through. Yes. Fleet Admiral. According to the video taken by the patrol seagulls, on an island in the Calm Belt, there's a green-skinned creature preying on sea kings. This strange creature has never been seen on the sea before. Sengoku's mouth twitched, a little impatient. He thought it was something important. Was it really necessary to personally call headquarters to report about a strange-looking creature? At such a critical time, these guys from the Marine branches, were they implying that he, the Fleet Admiral, didn't have enough headaches already? What kind of place was the Calm Belt? It was a zone infested with all sorts of sea kings. Wasn't it normal for an unseen sea king to occasionally appear? Anyway, these things just fought among themselves. As long as they didn't harm the Marine, there was no need to pay attention to them. Understood. Is there anything else to report? Sengoku said in a cold tone. This green-skinned creature, after hunting sea kings, eats them all. Sengoku couldn't take it anymore and interrupted directly. All right, we already know about it here. You can handle it yourselves. If there's nothing else important, don't call. After speaking, he directly hung up the phone. These branch soldiers are getting lazier and lazier. They report even the smallest matters. they have no ability to handle problems independently. I must find some time to give them proper training. Sengoku muttered to himself, then looked at Akainu. Where's Borsellino? Not at headquarters? Akainu was about to answer when the office door was pushed open. The person who entered was wearing a yellow and white striped suit. It was Marine Admiral Kizaru. Why are you so late? Sengoku frowned, seeing that the person had finally arrived. Being so lax at a time like this was truly irritating. Fleet Admiral. I have something to report to you, Kizaru said with a solemn expression. After returning from G2, he went directly to the Fleet Admiral's office to find Sengoku, but learned that he had gone to Mary Geos, so he returned to G2 to investigate the footprint. What is it? Sengoku asked, a bad premonition in his heart. Kizaru adjusted his thoughts. G2 branch, it was annihilated. What? Hearing this, Sengoku startled, almost losing his balance and falling off his chair. Standing firm, his face was full of disbelief. This, how could it be? G2 branch was a marine force second only to G1 and G5. Its overall strength was formidable, with a marine branch vice admiral stationed there, and thousands of marine soldiers. In addition, there were many warships, muskets, cannons, and other weapons. He just went to Mary Geos for a meeting. And when he returned, such a large branch was just gone. Who did it? Sengoku almost roared. In the first half of the Grand Line, who had the ability to annihilate the entire G2? They simply didn't put the marine in their eyes. Suddenly, a person came to mind. Could it be Roxio? He squeezed out these words through his teeth. Besides Roxio, he couldn't think of anyone else who had this strength and this audacity to dare to oppose the marine at this time. Kizaru was confused. Roxio was in Impel Down, so why would the Fleet Admiral suspect Roxio? However, he didn't dwell on these minor details and continued. Specifically, I still don't know who it was. But from the traces left at G2, I infer that it shouldn't be pirates. At these words, Sengoku's brows furrowed even tighter. Akainu also tilted his head slightly, his eyes fixed on Kizaru. He knew about the annihilation of G2, but he didn't know the details behind it. Kizaru had been personally in charge during this period. These are the photos I took at G2 branch. The soldiers disappeared, and the original location of the buildings also completely vanished. Only a few footprints were left there. As he spoke, he pulled out several photos he had personally taken at G2 from his pocket. Whoosh! Whoosh! Sengoku and Akainu both shifted their gaze to the photos. At the same time, Kizaru continued, according to the report from the only surviving marine soldier. The one who left the footprints was a giant creature. It eats people, and its entire body is covered in green skin. What did you say? Before Kizaru could finish, Sengoku suddenly looked up and interrupted him. Are you sure it's entirely covered in green skin? Kizaru's expression changed, somewhat confused, but he still nodded. Fleet Admiral, what's wrong? Just now, a branch rear admiral reported. In the calm belt, a green monster also appeared, and it's exactly as you just described. Its entire body is covered in green skin, but it's devouring sea kings. Sengoku said solemnly. He had just been saying that this thing wouldn't threaten the marine and didn't need to be dealt with. Unexpectedly, it was related to the annihilation of G2. This time, it was Kizaru's turn to be shocked. The monster he had been investigating for so long had actually appeared in the calm belt. But that's not right. Akainu's face stiffened, and he said in a muffled tone, it shouldn't be the same monster. There's quite a distance between the calm belt and G2. Moreover, if this thing can devour sea kings in the calm belt, why would it attack G2 branch? His suspicion was not without reason. After all, this so-called monster wasn't a pirate and had no conflict with the marine. Did that soldier say anything else besides the information you just mentioned? Sengoku agreed with Akainu's statement and continued to ask. This monster is called Bogard. I don't know if you, Fleet Admiral, recognize him. Kizaru said. Bogard? Sengoku and Akainu frowned simultaneously. After thinking hard for a while, both shook their heads. They had never heard of it. Too unfamiliar. Even the fleet admiral doesn't know him? Kizaru stroked his chin, muttering to himself. Then where did this guy come from? Besides this, is there any other information? Sengoku continued to ask. Kizaru was about to say there wasn't, but then he remembered that the soldier seemed to have said he saw Roxiu. Although it sounded like nonsense. After all, Roxiu was waiting for his execution. But it was still the testimony of the only survivor and eyewitness. Yes. Kizaru nodded. That soldier said he also saw Roxiu. He said Roxiu and Bogard came together. But he must have been scared senseless and was talking nonsense. Roxiu was still in Impel Down's level 6. Kizaru said to himself, shaking his head. However, he quickly realized the atmosphere was wrong. Akainu and Sengoku were both staring at him intently, with disbelief. You just said that Bogard appeared with Roxiu. Chapter 88, Bogard. Could he be the second great demon? Sengoku swallowed hard and asked in shock. Kizaru also noticed something was wrong with the two of them. That soldier definitely said that. But Marshal Sakazuki. Is it necessary to react so strongly? You still don't know about the Celestial Dragons incident, do you? Sengoku said, trying to calm himself down. Celestial Dragons? Kizaru frowned. He truly didn't know about the Celestial Dragons matter, as he had been dealing with post-war affairs at G2 during this time. He hadn't paid much attention to outside news. Sengoku nodded and briefly explained the matter of Roxia killing the Celestial Dragons. The implication was obvious. Roxiu wasn't in Impel Down, but on the Grand Line. How is this possible? After hearing this, Kizaru's expression instantly turned solemn. His heart was churning. It wasn't because the Celestial Dragons were killed, but because Roxio had appeared outside of Impel Down. Because this meant, what that soldier said, could it be, not nonsense? Roxiu was really with Bogard. The true culprit behind the destruction of G2 actually had Roxio's shadow behind him. However, Kizaru still found it hard to believe. It was simply too outrageous. Roxio, hasn't he been inside Impel Down all this time? He was confined by sea stone and specialized chains. It's impossible for him to get out. And if he could get out, why wait until now? He voiced the doubts in his heart. However, before Sengoku could answer, Kizaru's eyes suddenly lit up. As if he had thought of something terrifying. He overcame his own doubts. He figured it out himself. I understand. Roxio's capture was deliberate. No wonder his strength suddenly dropped so much. His last battle was indeed a display of weakness, he murmured. Ever since catching Roxio that day, he had felt uneasy. At the time, he thought he was being overly sensitive. Now, everything made sense. That fellow Roxio hadn't used his full strength back then, otherwise, it would have been impossible to capture him so easily. Thinking of this, Kizaru felt a chill rise from the soles of his feet. Borsellino. Your worries are likely correct. Akainu sighed heavily, recalling how he had dismissed Kizaru's unease back then. Judging by the current results, he had indeed thought too simply. Roxiu was even more cunning than they imagined. None of that matters now. The problem now is that Roxiu and Bogard appeared together. This means that the destruction of G2 was very likely orchestrated by Roxiu. Sengoku said in a deep voice. Then, what role does Bogard play in this? The moment he finished speaking, Akainu and Kizaru simultaneously thought of a possibility. Their eyes were filled with shock. Could it be that Bogard is another one of the 8 great demons? Sengoku had also thought of it, and said solemnly, it's highly possible. Firstly, Bogard, this monster, has never appeared before. This is his first appearance, which fits the description of the hidden, unseen force behind Roxiu. Secondly, Roxiu has always been alone. For a monster to suddenly appear next to him, we can't think of anyone else besides a demon. Akainu's face under his hat trembled, and his breathing quickened slightly. The second demon has finally begun to appear. Although they had always been worried about the supposed demonic forces behind Roxiu, in reality, the Marine only had to fight Roxiu, this one demon, all alone. But even so, it was enough to leave them overwhelmed. Even now, they hadn't completely dealt with Roxiu. And now, the second demon has appeared. This means that the enemies they are about to confront are no longer just Roxiu, but two. Although they knew this day would come eventually. But when the event actually occurred, the feeling was completely different. A mixture of emotions stirred, causing intense unease. At this moment, it was noon inside the vast office. It actually felt a bit cold. Akainu breathed out a hot sigh, making the temperature feel somewhat more peaceful. However, these are just speculations, Sengoku said. We can't rule out the possibility that this so-called Bogart is just a sea king that Roxiu captured from the Combelt and simply tamed by him. Even though he said this, Sengoku knew that this possibility was extremely slim. Akainu and Kizaru remained silent, and the atmosphere fell quiet. But no matter what, at least we are no longer completely ignorant about the demonic forces behind Roxiu. This is progress, Sengoku continued. Akainu calmed his emotions, his expression becoming resolute, magma flowing on his cheeks. Whether Bogart is a demon or not, he will be destroyed beneath the magma. The justice of the Marine will not retreat because of some so-called demon. Kizaru's gaze was equally firm. Marshal, issue the order. Sengoku patted the two admirals on the shoulder. Very good. This is the spirit an admiral should possess. Then, he turned around and walked toward his office chair. The two of you, take a trip to Impel Down. Investigate Roxiu's whereabouts. If he is there, bring him here. I want to personally keep an eye on him until the day of his public execution. If he is not there, then, arrest him with full force. Akainu and Kizaru nodded simultaneously. I will call Magellan later to tell him you are coming. Impel Down, the world's greatest prison, located in the Calm Belt in the first half of the Grand Line. There are a large number of massive sea kings on the seabed outside the prison, which is why Impel is known as the Iron Wall. The entire prison has 6 levels. It imprisons only serious offenders. Among them, the prisoners on level 6 possess the most terrifying strength. The minimum entry standard is a great pirate with a bounty over 100 million. Impel Down level 6. Inside the cell block. The walls are constructed of bluish-gray stone bricks, the space is huge, and the corridor is as wide as a basketball court. The lighting is sufficient, with a wall lamp installed every 5 meters on the walls, along with hundreds of snail-shaped surveillance den mushi. At this moment, 2 men stood inside the metal elevator of the cell block. Shortly after, the elevator stopped, landing steadily on the ground. Hiss accompanied by a subtle metallic friction sound, the elevator door opened, and 2 men walked out, one after the other. The one walking in front was about 20 years old. He wore a white chef's robe, a chef's hat on his head, and pushed a small cart loaded with vegetables and grain. The other person was a middle-aged man, around 40 years old. He wore a beige uniform robe and a dark green hat on his head. A special emblem was embroidered on the front brim of the hat. The 2 men were staff members belonging to this great prison. One was logistics, and the other was a jailer. Clack! 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 Their footsteps fell gently and carefully on the bluestone slabs, their walking posture extremely cautious. In this level 6 prison, neither of them dared to make any inappropriate moves. Even their voices were kept as low as possible. The corridor of the cell block was eerie and terrifying, filled with a sense of ill omen. Hurry up! Deliver the food and leave quickly. Don't look around, the slightly older man whispered instructively. The 2 men walked slowly and cautiously down the corridor. Meanwhile, in the innermost cell at the end of the corridor, a black-haired, black-eyed man slowly opened his eyes, a slight smile crossing his lips. The beautiful mechanical voice still echoed in his mind. Ding! The sixth talisman, the Rooster Talisman, has been detected and is about to be activated. The Tiger Talisman is currently merging. Chapter 89, Impel Down. Roxiu becomes one. As the Tiger Talisman merged, good-faced Luoxiu and evil-faced Luoxiu fused into one. And the moment the two fused, a heaven-shattering Haoshiku instantly swept through the entire level 6. Thump! In the corridor, two prison guards rolled their eyes and fell headfirst onto the bluestone slab, creating a dull thud. At this moment, the great pirates imprisoned in level 6. Feeling this intense Haoshiku, their eyes instantly opened. Clang clang clang. Some guys with iron shackles on their feet walked to the door of their cells. They stared fervently at the innermost part of the corridor. Only a handful of pirates showed no significant reaction. Level 6 has another big guy locked up. Among them, a tall and robust man with a shattered right ear, large scars on his left side, and chains wrapped around his body, curved his lips slightly and murmured, "Haoshiku. It's really rare. Unfortunately, it's still far inferior to Roger." It is said that all those imprisoned in Impel Down's level 6 are great pirates, but even among these great pirates, there are distinctions of rank. And this man was among the top few. Douglas Bullet. A former Roger Pirates crew member, an ability user of the Merge fruit, known as the Demon Heir, and a hero called the successor to Ogre. His strength was extremely formidable, even his crewmates from the Roger Pirates called him a monster. More than 20 years ago, he was exhausted by a buster call and captured by the Marine, then thrown into Impel Down. At the same time, on the other side of his cell, a tall and slender old man with white hair braided into two pigtails draped over his shoulders and crimson eyebrows, wore a wicked smile. Like Bullet, he was also among the top few powerhouses in level 6. Patrick Redfield. He was a great pirate from G.O.L.D. Roger's era, incredibly powerful, and on par with Roger and Whitebeard by himself. A top-tier great swordsman and a master of the strongest observation hockey. Besides these two, in a cell in a corner, another person was frowning, sensing that fleeting hockey. With a slicked-back hairstyle, a long horizontal scar across his face, and an earring in his right ear. It was none other than the Sand Crocodile, who was defeated by Roxiu and stripped of his Shichibukai title. At this moment, his signature cigar was gone, messy strands of hair hung over his forehead, and his face was covered in dust. Compared to his appearance in the Alabasta Kingdom, he looked much more disheveled. His eyes flickered, and he involuntarily thought of an annoying fellow, cursing fiercely. Damn it! Why does this hockey feel somewhat familiar? Damn, the view returns to the innermost cell of level 6. Roxiu felt the surging energy in his body and really wanted to shout, "I, Huhan-san, am back again." However, he ultimately found it too childish and hard to say. Damn it! I never expected the Tiger Talisman would actually undergo mitosis the moment it was acquired. Roxiu muttered. Although the two Roxius that split off were both himself, they represented two extreme personalities. Fortunately, the final outcome was smooth. Not only did the Tiger Talisman's fusion degree increase, but it was also about to activate the sixth talisman, obtaining the Tala Mask and activating Bogard. A sure profit. At this time, the brightness of the Rooster Talisman in the space was already close to the critical value. It is expected to be activated today. Currently, the only regrettable thing is the place he is currently in is Impel Down. However, Roxiu was not flustered. After obtaining the Tala Mask, he hadn't yet tried the abilities of these Shadow Legion. Come out! Hunter Crab Legion! As Roxiu's thoughts moved. Whoosh! Several shadow soldiers with extremely dark figures, a triangular blood-red eye on their forehead, and giant iron pincers for arms appeared beside Roxiu. The next moment. Crack! All the so-called iron chains binding Roxiu were cut short. The ice-freezing half of his body was shattered. The shackles made of sea stone were also destroyed. The strength isn't bad, Roxiu said, raising an eyebrow as he looked down at the scrap metal and debris on the floor. These shadow soldiers might not be very useful against Admiral level strength, but they were sufficient against those marine soldiers. And this was just one type of soldiers summoned. If all 9 types of soldiers were summoned simultaneously and cooperated, wouldn't it be an easy slaughter? For now, these thoughts were for later. Putting these thoughts aside for the moment, Roxia slowly stood up, his gaze fixed on the outside of the cell. It's time for a great prison break. 10 minutes ago. Impel down. Warden's office. A man with a huge build, 2 horns on his head, and an appearance like Satan sat in an office chair. On the desk in front of him were stacks of documents submitted by the management personnel of various levels within Impel Down. Next to these documents, there was also a photograph. The person in the photo was Roxio. How strange. Roxio has clearly been in Impel Down all along. Why does Sengoku keep calling to ask if Roxio is here? Now he even wants to send Admirals Sakazuki and Borsellino over. I really don't understand. Magellan picked up Roxio's photo, a look of confusion on his face. Ever since Roxio was captured, Sengoku had warned that this guy was an extremely dangerous individual. Magellan naturally didn't dare to be negligent, directly throwing Roxio into the most secure cell at the end of level 6. And outside, layers of impenetrable walls made of sea stone were set up. No one could possibly escape from inside. Even the Golden Lion, who previously severed his own legs, would absolutely not be able to escape if placed in this cell. But even so, Sengoku would still call from time to time to inquire about Roxio's situation. Recently, it's been even more outrageous, directly asking if Roxio was in his cell. And he even planned to send 2 admirals over. Sigh. Magellan rubbed his temples, sighing that being a warden was getting harder and harder. It seems I'll have to work overtime again recently. Working 4 hours a day was Magellan's unshakable habit. But ever since Roxio was imprisoned, everything changed. He started experiencing the 996 blessing. The 2 admirals should be arriving soon, I guess. I need to go greet them. Checking the time, Magellan muttered to himself. Gurgle gurgle. Suddenly, a rumbling stomach sound came from within. Here it comes again. Magellan clutched his stomach, his entire body hunched over, and he quickly scurried towards the toilet. Magellan, a Paramecia-type venom fruit ability user, also known as the Poison Human. Due to the overwhelming strength of his poison, he himself couldn't endure it, leading to diarrhea, spending nearly 10 hours a day in flux. Bang! The toilet door was slammed shut, followed by an extremely relieved groan from inside. However, just then, a powerful hockey vibrated. From level 6, it reached all the way to level 3. Although faint, Magellan still detected it. It seemed that the prisoners in level 6 were rioting. From inside the toilet, Magellan's furious roar echoed. Damn it! Chapter 90, Bullet. The Lonely Red. Whoosh! In the restroom, after a flush, Magellan leaned against the wall and walked out. As a highly responsible warden, he would never allow a prisoner riot, especially one involving heavy convicts from level 6. He had to suppress it immediately. At the same time, he was thinking about who this person could be. It must be that guy Bullet. In the level 6 cells, there seemed to be no one else besides Bullet who possessed Conqueror's Haki at an intermediate level or higher. Humph. After being imprisoned for 20 years, do you still think you can get out? Wishful thinking. Thinking this, Magellan walked out of his office, towards the end of the corridor, inside his cell. Roxio glanced around. It was dark, damp, and devoid of light. But with the dim yellow light on the wall, he could still see that not only were there ordinary cell walls around him. On the outermost layer, massive walls 3 to 4 meters thick, made of sea stone, had been specially constructed. They're really taking good care of me. Roxio raised an eyebrow. This kind of treatment was probably the best in level 6. Buzz, his aura slightly sank. Roxio twisted his neck. But these things couldn't trap him. The next moment, Roxio raised his hand, and a huge fireball formed in his palm. The light from the fire illuminated the cell as if it were daytime. The heavy convicts, who were gripping the iron bars outside the cell and watching, saw the light reflected in their pupils. Boom! The fireball exploded. Terrifying energy poured out, and the shockwaves caused the entire level 6 to shake. The walls made of sea stone were shattered like tofu. Ha 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 ha! It exploded. It exploded. Is this damned place finally starting to blow up? Who is the guy locked in the cell at the end? He actually used his devil fruit ability. Powerful hockey, powerful strength, he. What kind of guy did the Marines catch and bring in? Flip level 6 completely over. Turn this place into a purgatory. I want to leave this damned place. Seeing the violent explosion at the end of the cell block, the extremely evil pirates cheered madly, as if celebrating a great victory. What kind of place was Impel Down? It was known as the most secure prison in the world. Once someone was locked in, no matter how formidable they were in life, there was no possibility of escape. Throughout the entire history of pirates, only Golden Lion Shiki had successfully escaped using his devil fruit ability, and that was after sacrificing his own legs. But now, a pirate had caused an explosion on level 6, which was clearly an attempt to escape. As long as this pirate could completely overturn level 6, they would also have a chance to escape in the chaos. With this thought, the pirates' gazes were fixed on the cell at the end. Among them, Bullet, the Lonely Red, and Crocodile, their hearts tightened, and they also looked over. For them, this was also an opportunity to escape. Who could it be? To cause such a commotion on level 6. And to be able to use a devil fruit. Crocodile's face was suspicious, and he pondered with flickering eyes. It was basic. Common knowledge that everyone thrown into Impel Down was cuffed with sea stone. So, even though there were many ability users imprisoned, their devil fruit abilities were useless here. He was one of them. Therefore, he was very curious about this person who could unleash explosive flames and successfully escape from the cell. He must be a great pirate of the same caliber as Golden Lion. Only such a strong person could achieve this on level 6. In his line of sight, the person who caused the explosion was slowly walking out of the firelight. His footsteps were steady and powerful, tapping on the bluestone slab. Black hair, black eyes, and a tall, straight posture. Crocodile's whole body trembled, his pupils widened, and his breathing became rapid and heavy. Holy crap! Sand Crocodile almost shouted out loud. What great pirate like Golden Lion! This wasn't Roxiu, who personally sent himself in. How could he be here? Gulp! Looking at the guy who had brutally beaten him in Alabasta, Crocodile couldn't help but swallow. No wonder he felt that aura was a bit familiar earlier. Roxiu actually, awakened Conqueror's Haki. The moment he realized this, Crocodile's body froze. He had once thought of seeking revenge on Roxiu after getting out of Impel Down someday, but now, that thought instantly became less intense. He thought about himself, confined in Impel Down, living in a daze every day, and while he had considered escaping, it was only a thought. Then he looked at Roxiu, who had already blown up his cell. Suddenly, Crocodile realized that the gap between himself and Roxiu seemed to be growing wider. Roxiu naturally didn't know Crocodile's thoughts and continued to stroll leisurely down the wide corridor. Feeling the intense gazes converging on him from all sides, his expression was stern. He knew that the violent explosion would undoubtedly cause a commotion in Impel Down, and Warden Magellan was likely rushing this way. But to get out of Impel Down, a battle with Magellan was unavoidable. So, Roxiu was not in a hurry. However, he wasn't in a hurry. But the imprisoned pirates were. Seeing Roxiu leisurely strolling after getting out, they were all like ants on a hot pan. Damn it, what is he doing? Magellan must be coming. Kid, quickly open all the cells. Quickly blow this place up and let the Impel Down guys welcome the baptism of sin. Only by letting us out will your chances of a successful escape be greater. No matter how loudly the pirates shouted, Roxiu remained deaf to them, merely glancing at them before withdrawing his gaze. Thinking he would just let them out unconditionally was wishful thinking. Kid. Wait a moment. Just as Roxy walked past the entrance of a cell that looked like it hadn't been cleaned in a long time, an old voice suddenly called out to him. Roxy stopped and looked inside. It was a tall, thin old man with white hair braided into two pigtails hanging over his shoulders and crimson eyebrows. He naturally knew this person. The Lonely Red, Patrick Redfield. Roxy raised an eyebrow and said. The Lonely Red's eyes narrowed slightly upon hearing this title, which had not been mentioned in a long time, but the expression was fleeting. Although he didn't know why this young man, who looked to be in his 20s, recognized him, it wasn't important. Kid. Help me unlock these shackles. We can deal with Magellan together. The Lonely Red said in a deep voice. To get out of Impel Down, one couldn't avoid Magellan. Although the young man in front of him could escape from his cell, he didn't think he had the strength to confront Magellan. Just touching Magellan's venom fruit would result in severe poisoning. So, if he wanted to completely escape from Impel Down, he would have to rely on the strength of others. His own strength was naturally among the best of all pirates. Therefore, he believed that if the other party wasn't foolish, they would know what to do. Roxy merely glanced at him indifferently upon hearing this. No need. Chapter 91, Magellan's Arrival. Roxy didn't believe he would lose to an Impel Down warden, especially with Bogard by his side. The Lonely Red's expression clearly froze, seemingly not expecting to be refused. But before he could speak further, a loud laugh suddenly rang out. Ha 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 ha. Brat, you're arrogant enough. Are you planning to face Magellan alone? His strength is at least close to that of an admiral. Roxy looked in the direction of the voice. He knew this person too. Bullet. Roxy said indifferently. Interesting? The younger generation nowadays, there's actually someone who remembers my name. At this moment, Bullet sat on the ground, his back against the wall, his eyes scrutinizing Roxy with great interest. He was a bit surprised that this young man in front of him recognized him. After all, he had been imprisoned in Impel Down for at least 20 years. This brat in front of him looked to be at most 20 years old. However, considering he could even recognize the Lonely Red, it made sense. Someone called Roger's successor. It would be hard not to know you. Roxy said calmly. He knew Bullet's personality, bold and arrogant. Although he was a crew member on Roger's ship, he always wanted to surpass Roger. Even after being imprisoned in Impel Down for about 20 years, he didn't give up, but instead continued to cultivate in a state of extreme mental focus. Thinking about how to achieve this goal. Ha ha ha. Brat, I'm suddenly a little interested in you. What's your name? Bullet asked, a smile playing on his lips. Roxy. Or perhaps, Demon, Holy Lord. Demon, ha. Interesting. Bullet didn't know what Roxy meant by demon, but hearing those two words, he felt it was far from simple. Brat. There's no time. Magellan is heading this way. Seeing Roxy and Bullet still chatting idly, the Lonely Red interrupted, his powerful observation haki having already sensed Magellan's approach. And it wasn't just Magellan, the entire Impel Down was in an uproar due to the explosion just now. Hearing this, Roxy calmly turned his head to the Lonely Red, thinking, I know you're anxious, but don't be. After a pause, he said, I can help you get out too. The Lonely Red's eyes narrowed slightly, showing no emotional fluctuation. He knew the next words would be the crucial part. I heard your observation haki is very strong. Roxy glanced at him, stroking his chin as he spoke. The Lonely Red was startled, not understanding what Roxy meant by saying that at this moment. If it were anyone else, he could instantly read their thoughts, because his observation haki was indeed very strong, powerful enough to see through people's hearts. However, with the person in front of him, the Lonely Red couldn't see anything with his observation haki. But from the other party's words, he could guess his meaning. His observation haki was a bargaining chip for freedom. In that case, everything became simple. In this world, no one's observation haki can compare to mine. The Lonely Red said coldly. It's just helping you improve your hockey abilities. As long as I can leave here, everything is negotiable. Roxio raised an eyebrow. The old man was quite cooperative. Actually, the level 6 prisoners, in Roxio's plan, were definitely going to be released. For no other reason. Just to give those clingy Marines a headache, plunge Impel down into chaos, divert the Marines' attention, and serve as a reward for the world government imprisoning him. However, simply releasing these guys seemed a bit too disadvantageous. After all, they gained freedom without doing anything. This didn't comply with the principle of fair trade. Something had to be collected. Observation hockey was one of them. Since awakening observation hockey at Twin Capes, Roxio's hockey hadn't made any significant progress during this time, remaining stuck at the intermediate level. And the Lonely Red, as a great pirate who had cultivated observation hockey to its peak, was naturally worth spending some time negotiating with. After today, you will gain your freedom, Roxio said slowly. Then, he looked at Bullet, a slight smile playing on his lips. I heard your armament hockey is also very strong. Armament hockey was the next target. To deal with Logia ability users, with Roxio's current strength, he could defeat them, but the process would take a lot of effort. If he had armament hockey, it would be much simpler. Bullet, a master of all three types of hockey, who could cover his entire body with armament hockey, was an excellent subject for plagiarism. Ha 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 ha. Of course. Bullet smiled. As an influential figure even within the Roger Pirates, he naturally understood what Roxio meant by asking that. However, you'll have to get past Magellan first. Then we can talk. As he spoke, his gaze swept past Roxio and looked towards the end of the incredibly wide corridor. Magellan was about to reach level 6. Brat! What are you still waiting for? Hurry up! The Lonely Red urged, his voice somewhat cold, seeing that Magellan was almost there. Roxio turned to look at him, his deep pupils holding a hint of coldness, and he clenched his fists without speaking. Your little schemes are a bit too obvious. The pirate world has always been a place where the strong prey on the weak. Not to mention, the prisoners on level 6 are all vicious and ruthless. Therefore, Roxio knew that the few verbal agreements just now didn't hold much credibility. He had to let these strength-worshipping guys on level 6 see someone stronger than them for his words to be effective. Otherwise, even if he helped them gain freedom, an old fox like the Lonely Red, who was solitary by nature, would immediately disappear after getting out. In that case, it would be better to kill him on the spot. The Lonely Red met Roxio's gaze, and an inexplicable chill suddenly rose in his heart. Could this brat have seen through my thoughts? Impossible. Only he could see through others' minds, no one could understand him. I'd like to see how you'll deal with Magellan later, don't come begging me then. The Lonely Red sneered inwardly, no longer feeling so anxious. On the other side, Magellan hurried out of the elevator. His face was extremely grim. Just now, after sensing hockey, he also heard an explosion from level 6. This meant that prisoners had indeed escaped. This was intolerable. Bullet! Does a remnant of an old era still think he can cause trouble? He exhaled a puff of poisonous gas, his hands already transforming into thick venom. Sizzle the venom dripped down his arms, burning charred holes into the bluestone floor, emitting wisps of poisonous gas. Chapter 92, Magellan vs. Roxio. In the spacious corridor of Impel Down's level 6, the sound of footsteps echoed. Roxio twisted his neck and looked up at the shadows at the end of the corridor. He knew the strongest guy in Impel Down had arrived. The next moment, Roxio's aura slightly subsided, and he disappeared into the darkness. When he reappeared, he was already at the end of the corridor. Magellan! I've been waiting for you for a while. A cold, biting voice rang out next to Magellan's ear. The latter's expression suddenly changed. But he wasn't panicked. Bullet! You better crawl back where you came from, Magellan said coldly. That guy really escaped, yet he was so arrogant, daring to provoke him while still inside the prison. Did he really think he couldn't capture him again? However, soon after, Magellan realized something was wrong. This voice, why did it sound so young? It didn't sound like the voice of a middle-aged man, but more like a young person. You're not Bullet. The moment he realized this, Magellan sharply turned his head to look. It's you! Roxy. Upon seeing that face, Magellan trembled violently, and poison involuntarily slid down his cheek. Good news, it wasn't Bullet. Bad news, this guy seemed even more dangerous than Bullet. Damn it! Under Sengoku's specific instructions, he had clearly locked this dangerous individual in the most secure cell. Not only was his entire body wrapped in special chains and sea stone, but half his body was also sealed in ice. Outside the cell, a massive sea stone wall had even been constructed. Even if Golden Lion were placed inside, it would be absolutely impossible for him to escape. How did Roxio get out? Could it be that his strength was even greater than Golden Lion's? Suddenly, Magellan somewhat understood why Sengoku called every so often to ask about Roxio's status. And why 2 admirals were dispatched here. This guy Roxio was too dangerous. Roxio! Even you must face the judgment of justice. Magellan knew that this young man in front of him had defeated Admiral Kizaru. But Impel Down was not a place where anyone could run rampant. With a sudden sound, Magellan's expression hardened, and his aura instantly flared up. The power of the Doku Doku no Mi was triggered. His whole body was wrapped in poison, turning him into a poison man. Poison cloud. Accompanied by a low shout. Purple mist frantically poured out of Magellan, and the surrounding area immediately became shrouded in smoke. The hazy mist obscured visibility, and the stone slabs touched by the poisonous gas continuously sizzled. The poisonous gas released alone was more than an ordinary person could withstand. Once touched, a person's 5 senses would be paralyzed and gradually disappear. But this clearly did not apply to Roxio. With the horse talisman active, let alone the poisonous gas, even touching the poison liquid would have no effect. Don't bother with childish tricks. Roxio sneered. The next moment, he tapped his foot on the ground. He shifted sideways next to Magellan, his fist wind fierce, and he slammed a punch toward the small of Magellan's back. The torrential force was like 10,000 caddies of raw power. Descending. Magellan's expression changed abruptly. Although he didn't know why Roxio was unaffected by the poisonous gas and could still punch. Feeling the terrifying power about to strike him, he retreated rapidly without the slightest hesitation. At the same time, the poison liquid on his body gathered together. Poison path. Another low voice rang out. The purple poison liquid seemed to have a life of its own, gathering into a poison path. The next instant, the moment Magellan retreated, the poison path shot out, sliding toward Roxio. Its speed was only fast, not slow. In just a few breaths, it arrived in front of Roxio. Seeing this, Roxio's mouth curled up slightly, and the rabbit talisman instantly activated. Buzz, his figure instantly vanished from the spot. And the moment he disappeared, the poison path slid down and slammed onto the bluestone slab of the spacious corridor with a boom. Boom! The sudden loud noise was no less than a sky-shattering cannon blast. A massive pit appeared in the ground, and the splashing purple poison liquid shot out in all directions like arrows. Put! Put! Wherever the poison liquid landed, holes were burned through, accompanied by the release of poisonous gas. The poison was so potent that it was enough to burn through stone slabs. Terrifying energy scattered and swept out. Level 6 was shaking slightly from the impact. The sudden battle sent the prisoners on level 6 into a frenzy, but they were also filled with fear and worry. It's Magellan's power. Roxio is already fighting him. It's over, it's over. That damned guy, everything is over. He might be captured again. The heavy convicts felt the sounds of explosion coming from the elevator area at the end of the corridor. They knew Roxio had already engaged Magellan. But they didn't know if Roxio could defeat Magellan. If he failed, their only hope would be extinguished. How interesting. Are all the younger generation outside like this now? Unlike the other prisoners, under Bullet's observation hockey, he could perceive the details of the battle. From the brief exchange with Magellan, he could tell that Roxio's strength seemed a bit beyond what he expected. This made him sigh with emotion, having spent 20 years in prison. Had the new generation outside become so brave? Or was Roxio the only one like this? The Lonely Red shared the same thought. At this moment, his observation hockey was fully deployed, covering almost the entirety of level 6. His focus was naturally on Roxio. He wanted to see if this arrogant young man could defeat Impel Down's strongest fighting force. So far, he didn't seem to be at a disadvantage. Boom! At this moment, another loud explosion rang out. At the end of the corridor. The moment Roxio vanished, he arrived next to Magellan. His speed was so fast that the opponent couldn't react at all. The instant his figure appeared, without any unnecessary movements, a punch landed toward the face of the retreating Magellan. The latter hadn't even stabilized his body and hadn't anticipated Roxio's speed remaining so high even amidst the poisonous gas, taking the full force of the punch. Under the bombardment of immense power, his head felt like a blank canvas, and he nearly passed out. His body flew like a kite with a broken string, tracing an arc in the air before heavily smashing onto the ground, scattering shattered rock. However, this wasn't over. After Roxio landed the punch, he shifted sideways again. Swoosh! He appeared next to Magellan. He raised his foot, and his whip kick descended like a battle axe, striking toward Magellan. Thud! Following a dull thud, Magellan felt a sharp pain in his side, and the surrounding scenery spun violently. His body once again uncontrollably shot backward. Boom! He slammed directly into the corridor where the prisoners were held, kicking up a cloud of poisonous mist. Chapter 93, The Battle on Level 6. The violent explosion and the figure forcefully entering their line of sight instantly silenced the prisoners who had previously fallen into madness. Under their gaze, a gigantic figure crawled out from the center of the wide passageway. Its entire body was enveloped in venom. Especially its eyes, which were brimming with toxic gas. It's Magellan! He was actually sent flying. The prisoners recognized the person who had been knocked away, finding it hard to believe. That young man who walked out from the end of the cell could actually send Magellan flying. It seemed everything that was happening was different from what they had imagined. Damn it! It's poisonous! However, after recovering from their shock, the prisoners realized the seriousness of the situation. At this moment, the venom on Magellan's body was dripping like lava, burning the floor while simultaneously releasing toxic gas. As long as it was inhaled, one would immediately be poisoned. Therefore, even though Magellan's attention was not currently focused on them, these prisoners still looked as if they were facing a formidable enemy. In the center of the passageway, Magellan slowly stood up. He couldn't be bothered with these prisoners. Although these guys were all on level 6. Any one of them, if placed in the outer seas, would be a great pirate capable of striking fear into people's hearts. But he knew very well that even if these guys combined their strength, they might not pose as great a threat as Roxio. A person who was specifically monitored by Fleet Admiral Sengoku and could escape from the prison cell unscathed on his own. Too troublesome. His blood-red eyes were firmly fixed on the position in the shadows. He exhaled a mouthful of dense toxic gas from his devilish mouth. He had taken a punch from Roxio head-on, although he wasn't injured, it still felt unpleasant. The power Roxio unleashed from his seemingly not-so-strong body was terrifying. What a troublesome fellow! Magellan's gaze was ice-cold. His body was undergoing drastic changes at this moment. Venom frantically overflowed from his body, pools of purple liquid gathered behind him as if alive. Gurgle gurgle. The venom gathered together, making a sound like bubbling lava. In just a few breaths, a pool of highly poisonous liquid had accumulated behind Magellan. Swoosh, the next moment. From the purple liquid, a poison column burst forth, rapidly expanding against the wind. Subsequently, the poison column took shape in the air, transforming into a massive poison dragon. Soon, 2 more identical poison dragons emerged from within. 3 poison dragons, bearing ferocious, gaping maws, danced in the air. A suffocating sense of oppression instantly swept through the entire level 6 prison. Sizzle, sizzle, sizzle. The poison dragons opened their mouths, and the venom dripping from their lips was highly corrosive. Poison dragon. Magellan's devil fruit ability. What intense pressure! Seeing the poison dragons appear, the prisoners' previous thoughts were immediately suppressed. It wasn't just them, even Bullet and the Lonely Red couldn't help but frown. They knew that the most terrifying aspect of Magellan's devil fruit ability was not how powerful his attack was, but the vast coverage and extreme potency of the lethal poison. If the 3 poison dragons lunged forward, anyone who got even a drop of venom on them would instantly be poisoned and lose their combat capability. And in such a confined space within the prison city, even if Roxio was fast, there would be no escaping it. It should end now. Magellan muttered coldly. As he finished speaking, he stomped his toe forcefully on the ground. His figure shot out like a cannonball. The splashing venom dripped onto the walls, leaving them riddled with holes. Roxio, facing Magellan who was approaching enveloped by the poison dragons, maintained a calm expression. He lifted his dark, sharp eyes and clenched his fists. Stomping on the floor of Impel down level 6. His body suddenly sank, and amidst flying rubble, Roxio had already launched into the air, quickly soaring toward Magellan. He is still too young after all. Seeing Roxio advance instead of retreating, Magellan sneered internally, accompanied by a low shout. The 3 purple giants, bearing their fangs and claws, charged violently toward Roxio, carrying terrifying momentum. Excellent timing. Roxio raised both fists high, directly confronting the oncoming poison dragons. A black figure against 3 giant dragons dozens of times larger than him. Just one breath later, the 2 collided. Thud. There was no anticipated explosion sound. Roxio was completely swallowed into the belly of the poison dragon. Success! Seeing this, Magellan's expression lifted. He was extremely confident in his venom fruit ability. Any person swallowed by the poison dragon, whether they could get out or not, they would be lethally poisoned and defeated without a fight. Is it over? In the cell, Bullet's eyes narrowed as he murmured, "It has just begun." The Lonely Red's eyes were indifferent. Although he disliked the arrogance of this junior, Roxio, his ultimate observation Haki told him that Roxio entering the poison dragon was not a sign of being suppressed, he had come prepared. If his prediction was correct, Roxio would emerge from within very soon. The truth was exactly as he had said. At the very moment he finished speaking, a loud boom was heard. The poison dragon that had swallowed Roxio thrashed violently in the air. It seemed to be suffering extreme torment. The next moment, a figure tore directly through the poison dragon's body, emerging like a bolt of lightning. The instant he emerged, Magellan's expression changed, and he drove the remaining 2 poison dragons to bite at Roxio. Boom, boom, boom. Roxio waved his arms, the Ox talisman power spread throughout his body, and his fists were like rolling a mighty river, or shaking a mountain, intending to tear it apart. The savage force struck the poison dragons, and in just a moment, the 2 purple dragons of venom, attacking from the left and right, shattered like clay chickens and pottery dogs. The energy released by the shock wantonly destroyed the confined space. The imprisoned prisoners were drenched in sweat, dodging the splashing venom, each one looking as if they were personally fighting Magellan. In the next instant, Roxio flashed and appeared behind Magellan. He raised his leg and swept it toward Magellan's head. Poison gas bomb. Magellan felt a chill rise from the soles of his feet, sensing intense danger approaching. Without hesitation, he sprayed bubbles containing tear gas from his mouth, attempting to disrupt Roxio's attack. Instantly, a cloud of sight-obscuring smoke rose up. However, such a tactic, in Roxio's view, was completely useless. It was still just a child's trick. Observation Haki had long since locked onto Magellan's position. He absolutely could not dodge this kick. Thud. The whip kick landed, following a dull sound. Magellan's head exploded with a loud bang, and the bursting sound stung his eardrums painfully. Without surprise, his body was kicked flying once more. After soaring dozens of meters, he finally managed to stop by smashing into a wall made of sea stone. Chapter 94, I Can Prove It. His physique ignores devil fruit abilities. Poison dragon neutralized. Magellan was sent flying again. Watching Magellan get knocked away by Roxiu again, the great pirates on level 6 couldn't help but refocus their attention on Roxiu. This kid, who seemed younger than any of them, appeared a little too strong. Strange, what kind of ability is this? He can actually be immune to Magellan's potent poison. Bullet muttered. In the previous battles, Roxiu's performance, while good, hadn't been particularly astonishing. But that last scene truly shocked his worldview. Magellan's poison dragon, let alone being fully enveloped by it, even a tiny bit, could be deadly. Even he had to cover his entire body with armament haki to minimize the effects. But Roxiu had neither armament haki nor any other special actions. He achieved this effect by simply enduring it with his body. It was truly unbelievable. Had Magellan's devil fruit ability weakened? Or was his physical fitness strong enough to be unaffected by the poison? Brat, you really do have some tricks up your sleeve. The Lonely Red said calmly. Although he knew Roxiu would emerge from it thanks to his observation haki, he didn't actually know why. Because he had never seen such a situation before. It's due to Roxiu's powerful physique. His physical fitness is already strong enough to be immune to the effects of devil fruit abilities. At this moment, Crocodile, who had been silently watching the battle outside, suddenly spoke. Crocodile? Bullet was somewhat surprised. His sparring opponent from his youth had actually been imprisoned in Impel Down. Kid, do you know him? Why are you so sure? The Lonely Red frowned and asked. All three of them possessed observation haki, giving them extremely keen hearing, so their conversation didn't seem out of place at this moment. Crocodile ignored Bullet and continued, following up on the Lonely Red's words, I do. Because I fought him. In the Alabasta Kingdom, Crocodile also used his devil fruit ability. The assimilated sand had an additional effect. Any living creature touched by the sand he controlled would instantly have its moisture sucked dry, losing its combat capability. Originally, this ability was almost invincible, until he met Roxiu. The scene where Roxiu ignored his devil fruit effects was still vivid in Crocodile's mind. Before, he hadn't understood why, thinking it was just that his own strength wasn't enough, and his devil fruit ability hadn't reached the level to break Roxiu's defense. But now, it seemed it wasn't the devil fruit's reason, but Roxiu's physique. Even Magellan, who had awakened his devil fruit to such an extent, still couldn't affect this monstrous guy. Coming out of a wide-range attack, then getting close to Roxiu, and then being kicked away, this scene felt to Crocodile like it happened yesterday, only he was replaced by Magellan. For some reason, seeing a powerhouse as strong as Magellan also being kicked away by Roxiu in the same manner, Crocodile's heart actually found a trace of peace. You fought him? Bullet and the Lonely Red asked simultaneously, not understanding Crocodile's meaning. He's the one who sent me in here. Crocodile said calmly, seemingly having accepted it all. The Lonely Red? Bullet? Crocodile awkwardly coughed and continued, don't be surprised. Not only was I defeated, but Admiral Kizaru was also beaten by him. The Lonely Red? Bullet? Crash. Under the wall at the end of the corridor. Magellan stood up from the rubble, shaking off the stones on his body. He felt a bit lightheaded and his legs were somewhat weak. He vigorously shook his head to regain consciousness. Compared to the physical pain, the emotions in his heart were the most difficult to bear at this moment. Because his poison dragon had lost its effect. He had clearly enveloped the opponent, yet he completely failed to poison them. Instead, he was forcefully smashed. This was the first time he had encountered such a situation since awakening his devil fruit. As a venom fruit ability user, he knew better than anyone how potent his venom was to living creatures. Even he, the owner of the devil fruit, suffered greatly from it. Otherwise, he wouldn't have diarrhea several times a day, and even Sudichan was unwilling to get too close to him because of his breath. However, Roxiu was able to achieve a level of immunity even greater than his own, which was truly unimaginable. Was it because Roxiu ate a devil fruit that granted immunity to poison? Magellan thought to himself. However, this thought was immediately dismissed the moment it arose. Because according to the information Sengoku had given him, Roxiu's devil fruit ability was to spew explosive flames. Truly perplexing. Magellan couldn't figure it out, so he simply stopped thinking about it. With his potent poison rendered useless, one of his overwhelming advantages disappeared. Facing Roxiu, he felt an unprecedented pressure. But the battle had not stopped. I can't let him get close, Magellan thought to himself. Roxiu's strength was too great. In close quarters combat, he would be at a complete disadvantage. With this in mind, Magellan stomped his foot hard on the ground. His aura instantly surged. Poison pufferfish. From his fully venom-transformed mouth, several small spheres of purple venom were spat out, rapidly flying towards Roxiu. They were numerous and dense, like cannonballs, exploding upon contact. Roxiu shook off some venom clinging to his hand, his gaze sharp as he watched the torrent of poison spheres. He slightly squatted, explosive energy gathering between his legs. The next instant, he suddenly pushed off with his toes. Boom! A crater several meters wide appeared on the spot, with cracks spreading like a spiderweb. Roxiu's figure shot out like a cannonball. His speed was incredibly fast, dodging the purple poison bullets that grazed his face. Swish, swish, swish. In Magellan's line of sight, he only saw a black lightning bolt constantly moving sideways, with terrifying speed. Every time he stepped, there was an explosive sound. Not a single one of the poison spheres he spat out hit the opponent. Damn it! Magellan was greatly alarmed. In just a moment, Roxiu had closed the distance. Knowing he couldn't be caught at close range, his body immediately retreated rapidly. However, Magellan's strength had always been his poison, not his speed. Before long, he was caught by Roxiu. A punch slammed into his face. Thud! Magellan was directly punched away. The next moment, Roxiu's figure flashed on the spot, appearing above Magellan. He brought his foot down. Thud! There was another dull thud. Magellan's body heavily smashed into the stone slab. If it weren't for this being the lowest level of impel down, the force of this kick could have directly penetrated the floor, reaching deep below. And at this moment, the elevator on level 6 chimed, and the doors opened. Impel Down's main forces arrived on the scene. Chapter 95, Impel Down, The Coming Riot. The leader was bare-chested, his belly bulging like a demon, his brow bones extending outwards like horns, a pharaoh's false beard, and a trident in his hand. To his left and right stood two tall, beautiful women. One held a similar trident, had a fiery figure, curly blonde hair, and wore a fuchsia-tight leather suit and pointed high heels with spikes. The other had an elegant demeanor, wore reddish-brown sunglasses, a hat tilted to cover her right eye, and long, curly golden hair. They were Impel Down Vice Warden Hannibal, Chief Guard Suddy, and Head Jailer Domino, respectively. Behind them stood a group of jailers armed with weapons. However, as soon as they stepped out of the elevator, they witnessed a scene they would never forget. Their mouths hung wide open, their faces filled with disbelief. The warden was actually being beaten black and blue. Vice Warden Hannibal froze for a moment, thinking he had seen wrong, and rubbed his eyes vigorously. However, the scene before him did not change in the slightest due to this action. The warden was truly being beaten black and blue. What was going on? Although he had always wanted to be promoted and take Magellan's place, he still had great faith in the strength of the current Impel Down warden. In Impel Down, it could be said that no one could defeat him. The power of the venom fruit was enough to sweep aside any prisoner. But now, he was being brutally beaten without any chance to retaliate. It's Roxiu. Domino, on the side, recognized the person beating the warden, covering her small mouth in surprise. However, before they could react further, another explosion sounded. Magellan's body was once again sent flying by Roxio's punch, landing on the stone slab and creating a deep crater. Whoosh! As Magellan landed, Roxio followed close behind. He reached out and grabbed Magellan, then threw him into the air, following up with a flying kick. The warden Magellan was violently kicked away, sliding a considerable distance on the ground before he barely managed to stabilize himself. He happened to stop in front of the vice warden and chief guard. Warden, are you injured?" Domino asked worriedly, covering her small mouth. The warden was actually beaten this badly. Since she started working at Impel Down, this was the first time she had seen such a sight. For a moment, she was somewhat flustered. Magellan coughed violently several times. He felt the world spin, and Domino's voice reached his ears. His body felt like it was falling apart, with varying degrees of damage. However, as a top-tier powerhouse, he quickly regained consciousness and adjusted. He slowly climbed up from the ground, his eyes fixed on Roxio. Too fast. Only these few words could describe Roxio. His speed was unimaginably fast. It was simply impossible to avoid close combat with him. Moreover, the opponents seemed to be immune to poison. If things continued this way, he would undoubtedly lose. I must stall for time. He swallowed, calculating in his mind. Marine Headquarters Admirals Sakazuki and Borsellino were rushing to Impel Down. He believed that as soon as they arrived, the current situation could be instantly reversed. Bring all the forces in Impel Down. Have someone release the prisoner Shiryu of the Rain. Tell him that resolving the riot is an opportunity to atone for his sins. Magellan announced the next steps in the shortest possible time. Yes. Vice Warden Hannibal stood straight and immediately gave the orders. Although he really wanted a promotion, at a time like this, dealing with the immediate trouble was the most important thing. Quite a lot of people are here. Roxio didn't care. His figure landed in the corridor. He glanced at the Impel Down jailers who had arrived, and the corners of his mouth slightly curved upwards. Those who Roxio's gaze swept over swallowed, feeling as if they had fallen into an ice cellar, a venomous snake crawling up their spine, and fear spontaneously surfacing from within their hearts. They couldn't help but grip their weapons tightly, beads of sweat dripping from their foreheads. How strong must someone be to brutally beat the warden? Just thinking about it made them break out in a cold sweat. However, their strength wasn't enough to warrant Roxio's intervention. He looked at the prisoners confined in their cells. Similarly, every prisoner Roxio's icy gaze swept over trembled with fear. Their previous doubts about Roxio completely vanished. They were confident in their strength and arrogant, but no one confined on level 6 was a fool. This person, who was pummeling Magellan, probably had admiral-level combat power. Roxio smiled, observing the prisoners' reactions. Very good. The shocking effect of overwhelming strength had been achieved. The next moment, Roxio's aura slightly intensified. The magic of the dragon talisman was triggered. A huge fireball appeared in his palm. As magic continuously poured in, it became massive and scorching hot. The dim level 6 was illuminated brightly, as if a sun hung above it. Upon seeing this, Magellan's face immediately changed drastically. Not because of the explosive fireball in Roxio's hand, but because Roxio's gaze was not on him, but on the prisoners. Roxio was going to release all the prisoners on level 6. Thinking of this, Magellan's heart clenched, and he roared. Damn it! You! However, his words had just been shouted out. Roxio moved. The fireball in his hand instantly shot out, striking a wall. Immediately after, countless fireballs erupted. Boom, boom, boom. In just a moment, continuous explosions echoed throughout the entire level 6 prison. Flames filled the sky, obscuring vision. The cells where the prisoners were held were directly blasted into fragments by the explosive flames, and the chains that bound the prisoners were also melted by the fireballs. After the flames subsided, the entire level 6 was a horrific sight. The prisoners were eagerly leaping out of their respective cells. Ha 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 ha. Are we finally free? Suddenly, the air feels much fresher. Impel down, prepare for a massive riot. He 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 he. If the roles were reversed, I'd show you what cruelty is. Impel Down's level 6 witnessed its largest prisoner riot in history. Everyone's eyes were fierce as they looked at the Impel Down guards. And Magellan, the current warden of Impel Down, was enraged to the extreme as he watched the rioting prisoners. In his extreme fury, the purple venom on his body instantly faded, turning bright red. And he himself completely transformed into a red venomous man. The venom on him furiously merged and expanded. His aura was extraordinary, climbing to its peak. Quick, get out of here! Vice Warden Hannibal's face changed drastically at the sight, and he quickly led his subordinates to distance themselves from Magellan. He knew the warden was about to go berserk. In his line of sight, a giant skeletal venomous man had already formed behind Magellan. A sense of oppression instantly swept through all of Impel Down. Chapter 96, Magellan defeated. The admirals arrive. The calm belt waters outside Impel Down. Aboard a specially powered warship. Marine Admiral Kuzan and Akainu stood on the ship's deck, heading toward Impel Down. At this moment, Admiral Kuzan felt somewhat uneasy. The closer they got to Impel Down, the more his eyelids twitched, giving him a constant feeling that something bad was about to happen. Ever since he learned that the green-skinned monster was connected to Roxiu and might be one of the 8 great demons, this ominous feeling had never gone away. Akainu, standing beside Kuzan, was quite calm in comparison. Borsalino. Even if Roxiu can truly enter and exit Impel Down freely, he will certainly be arrested again. Akainu stated with a resolute expression. Adjust your mindset. Justice will not fail. Since he was able to arrest Roxiu the first time, he was confident he could arrest Roxiu a second time. Even though Roxiu was suspected of deliberately feigning weakness the first time, he did not believe Roxiu's true strength was enough to contend with both him and Borsalino. It would just be a slightly more troublesome process. Moreover, Magellan is guarding Impel Down. His venom fruit is especially effective against fast opponents within the enclosed spaces of Impel Down. Akainu continued. Kuzan slowly exhaled. That's secondary. It's that monster named Bogard. I have a feeling he might appear in Impel Down along with Roxiu. Hearing this, Akainu took off his hat and rubbed the top of his head. Even if he appears, so what? Bogard's massive body is equivalent to a living target. Dealing with him should be easier than dealing with Roxiu. Besides, he couldn't possibly appear inside Impel Down. Akainu did not believe Bogard could pull off any tricks. Even if he was very likely the second demon. He believed that with one punch from his magma fruit ability, if the opponent couldn't dodge, it would definitely punch a hole right through them. Furthermore, according to reports, Bogard had only appeared in the Calm Belt and at the G2 branch. Given his immense size, if he were actually inside Impel Down, Warden Magellan would have reported the information to Marineford long ago. Kuzan nodded. That was indeed logical, and he did not continue the topic. Just then, Akainu, standing at the bow of the ship, suddenly frowned and quickly put his hat back on. His head. Wait. Something is happening inside Impel Down. At this point, the warship they were aboard was rapidly approaching the great undersea prison. Using their observation hockey, they could clearly sense the commotion occurring inside Impel Down. This was highly abnormal for the strongest prison, which was usually extremely solemn. It's a prisoner riot. Kuzan naturally noticed it too, exclaiming in surprise. The two exchanged glances, and both saw a hint of worry in the other's eyes. Could it be Roxiu? Without any hesitation, they ordered the warship to maximize its speed and rapidly approach Impel Down. Inside Impel Down, Magellan stared intently at Roxiu, thick red venom dripping from his pupils. Landing on the stone slab, it sizzled and smoked. Venom Demon, Hell's Judgment. accompanied by a fierce roar. The giant red skeleton behind Magellan wildly swung its limbs. Its arm lifted, and the massive palm struck down from the air. At that moment, the entire spatial corridor seemed to be filled by the giant palm. Poison gas and venom flew everywhere as the massive palm, carrying terrifying power, delivered a precise strike. Although the palm was aimed at Roxiu, due to its sheer size, it looked more like an indiscriminate attack. It's Magellan's venom. Run quickly. Damn it, don't let the venom touch you. The prisoners who had just escaped their cells watched the terrifying scene before them, their pupils shrinking. They retreated explosively, fleeing outside the range of Magellan's area attack. Armament hockey, hardening. Douglas Bullet grinned fiercely, activating his armament hockey. Instantly, the pitch-black armament hockey enveloped his entire body. Under the reflection of the firelight, it shone with an inexplicable luster. How truly unpleasant! The lonely red muttered, looking at the massive palm striking down. He did not possess armament hockey, but his speed and observation hockey were enough for him to handle this situation. His figure flashed like a streak of light, drifting through the cell block and landing steadily in a blind spot. Desert Spada. Compared to Douglas Bullet and the lonely red, Crocodile looked much more strained. Having just emerged from his cell, he saw the sky-covering venom descending. What damn timing! Without hesitation, a giant broadsword composed of sand formed in his hand, blocking in front of him. He used this to avoid the venom's intrusion. Boom! At this moment, the giant skeleton venom person's palm had already slammed down. Simultaneously, Roxia stood calmly in the center of the palm, looking up at the red skeleton that appeared terrifying but posed no actual threat to him. A sharp light flashed in his eyes. He hunched over like a shrimp. Using his waist as the point of exertion, savage power accumulated within his body. Rumble. Following an explosive sound. Roxio, like a cannonball, advanced instead of retreating, slamming straight into the center of the giant palm. He swung both fists through the air, piercing power transmitting through his arms and converging between his knuckles. With a loud thud, the giant palm and Roxia collided, like a massive bomb detonating. The sound alone made people instinctively cover their ears. And in the instant the two collided, terrifying shockwaves sliced out in all directions like sharp knives. The floor was ripped apart by the airflow, the walls trembled and burst open, and red venom splattered everywhere. The prisoners watched the horrifying scene with gaping mouths. He, truly is a monster. Douglas Bullet, the lonely red, and the others watched Roxio, who chose to fight violence with violence rather than dodge, and twitched their mouths as they spoke. They hadn't expected Roxio's method of response to be so simple and brutal. He had directly shattered the venom palm. In the corridor, the hand of the giant skeleton venom person, which was composed of red venom, dissolved into dripping liquid. It looked like a disabled giant that had lost its hand. However, quickly, under Magellan's devil fruit ability, the venom once again gathered from his body, reforming into a complete arm. Again! Magellan roared. He refused to believe that Roxio was truly immune to all poisons. He believed that by continuously attacking with venom, there would eventually be a moment when the opponent's defenses were breached. The giant skeleton swung its arms, clapping them together in the air, attempting to crush Roxio between its palms. What a nuisance! Roxio sighed a slow, hot breath, looking at the palms closing in from both sides. The next moment, the dragon talisman activated. Wang, a burst of intense flame erupted from Roxio's mouth, shooting toward the red palm. Instantly, sparks flew everywhere. Sizzle, sizzle, sizzle. A sound like searing meat was heard. The explosive flames, the moment they burst forth, wrapped around the red venom like maggots clinging to bone. The scorching heat continuously evaporated the venom, turning it into black ash. At the same time, Roxio's figure flashed where he stood. Without any warning, he appeared next to Magellan's body. Intense flames formed in his hand and blasted toward Magellan's back. Seeing this, Magellan was greatly horrified. However, although he knew he was in trouble, he couldn't react in time. Subconsciously, he blocked with his arm, which had turned into venom. Boom! A blinding flash of fire exploded, comparable to a cannonball detonating on level 6. The entirety of level 6 shook involuntarily. Cough, cough. Magellan was scorched black all over, his face covered in a layer of black ash. He coughed violently several times, and a mouthful of fresh blood surged up from his throat and was spat out. Kneeling on one knee, his condition looked extremely poor. Although he hated to admit it, he knew that in his current state, he had no chance of winning against Roxiu's strength. But this battle was far from over. Roxiu! You won't escape Impel Down in. The end. Magellan struggled to stand up, panting heavily. He had already sensed that the two Marine admirals were approaching. Roxiu was destined to be arrested again. Roxiu frowned, realizing the same thing, and looked up at the ceiling above level 6. The next moment, a fierce shout was heard coming from above. Hell dog! Chapter 97, Two Admirals. The voice fell silent. Rolling magma slammed down from above. The stone slabs instantly melted, and the air temperature rapidly soared. A hellhound head, composed entirely of magma, appeared in everyone's sight. Its target was clearly Roxiu, who was standing in the passageway. Whoosh! The momentum surged. Roxiu raised his arm, and a ball of scorching flame instantly shot out. The bursting firelight defied gravity, shooting upwards to meet the attack and tearing through the layers of air. Boom! The fireball and the magma helldog collided in the blink of an eye. An earth-shattering explosion erupted. Violent energy raged through the space, magma splattered, and everywhere it touched resembled a purgatory. Yada no Kagami. Soon, another tall figure materialized from above level 6, emitting a dazzling light that made it impossible to open one's eyes. The speed at which the yellow lasers spread was unbelievably fast. The entirety of the dim level 6 was illuminated in bright yellow. Yet, within this bright yellow light, terrifying energy was contained. Only a brief second passed from the moment the figure descended. Countless light bullets shot out from him. Like raindrops, they covered Roxiu. Boom, rumbling. The sky full of light exploded with loud bangs, and the entire Impel Down was thrown into chaos at this moment. Outside the calm belt, the colossal sea kings that were originally circling Impel Down slowly sensed the terrifying aura inside and quickly swam away. Clack! A tall figure wearing a red suit, with a blood-red rose embroidered on his chest, and donning a marine cap, landed beside Magellan. Similarly, another figure, dressed in a yellow and white striped suit with short, curly hair, stood on the other side. The scorching wind dispersed the poisonous gas. The oppressive feeling enveloping level 6 instantly increased by more than one level. Admirals. Sakazuki. Borsellino. The crowd of prisoners who had barely dodged the light bullet explosions couldn't help but gasp when they saw the newcomers. The momentum that had just been about to overturn everything instantly became much more restrained. If it had only been Magellan here before, perhaps they would have been fine, because Roxiu alone was enough to completely restrain him. Moreover, if they all acted together, escaping from Impel Down was a certainty. But, facing admirals, and two of them at that, the possibility of a jailbreak drastically decreased. At this moment, the prisoners in level 6 quieted down, and a bone-chilling coldness rose from their souls. Even the high temperatures left behind by the explosions could not dispel it. Oh dear! The admirals are here, things just got troublesome. Bullet, whose entire body was covered in armament hockey, scratched his head and muttered as he looked at the two admirals who had arrived. Two admirals, even in his peak state, he might not be able to defeat just one of them. Even the four emperors on the sea couldn't simultaneously defeat two admirals. Roxiu is probably in big trouble. But while sighing, he also felt a bit strange. Were the admiral's reinforcements really this fast? They arrived right after Impel Down had just experienced trouble. Marineford seems to be quite a distance from Impel Down, right? Could it be that they came here not just because of the Impel Down riot, but for something else entirely? Bullet murmured in his heart. When he saw Akainu and Kizaru appear, and their gazes remained fixed on Roxiu, he became even more certain of his guess. Could it be because of Roxiu? The more he thought about it, the more likely it seemed. Bullet increasingly found the situation interesting. His own identity hadn't caused the two admirals to spare him a single glance, yet Roxiu could command this level of attention. Who exactly is this kid, that he's worth Marineford sending out two admirals? Bullet stared intently at Roxiu. Roxiu's brief self-introduction flashed through his mind. Devil? Holy Lord? His figure concealed within the crowd, Bullet wasn't in a hurry to leave, silently observing everything that was about to unfold. The messier the situation, the more advantageous it was for him. At the same time, he really wanted to know. How would Roxiu deal with a situation like this? Furthermore, the lonely red slightly narrowed his eyes, his figure quietly retreating behind the crowd. Admiral-level pressure wouldn't worry him much if he were in his full strength, but since his current condition was extremely poor, he chose not to confront their sharp edge. Moreover, since their target was Roxiu, he could reap the benefits of the conflict. Crocodile, however, was different. His arm turned into sand, and he stared intently at Kizaru, the anger on his face unconcealed. However, Kizaru completely ignored him. Only Roxiu was reflected in his pupils. Akainu. Kizaru. Roxiu surveyed the admirals who had arrived, showing little surprise. There was no doubt they had come specifically for him. Roxiu. You really got yourself arrested on purpose. Kizaru's expression was extremely grim as he said this through gritted teeth. To make a typically laid-back, lazy admiral show such an expression. He was genuinely traumatized by Roxiu. If, before entering Impel Down, he still held a sliver of hope regarding his previous conjectures, then the moment he saw Roxiu, everything became clear. Everything Fleet Admiral Sengoku had deduced was correct. His own persistent ominous premonition was also correct. Roxiu being arrested and trapped in level 6 was all an act. Which meant the Marines had never truly won against Roxiu once, instead, they had been kept in the dark and played for fools. Suddenly, he regretted agreeing to Fleet Admiral Sengoku's proposal for a public execution back then. Now it seemed it hadn't deterred pirates at all, instead, the public execution had become a joke. If only they had been able to execute Roxiu on the spot back then. All that was impossible now. Even standing opposite Roxiu, he couldn't help but marvel at Roxiu's boldness and meticulousness, daring to put himself in danger. Reining in his scattered thoughts, Kizaru's eyes locked onto Roxiu, and a powerful aura instantly swept out. A difficult opponent. However, the justice of the Marines will not change because of you. Akainu, on the side, could no longer hold back. He exhaled a magma-hot breath, his tone ringing with force. Compared to their last meeting, his expression was much graver. Dots of scorching magma dripped down from Akainu's face. Magma instantly covered his arm. The terrifying high temperature seemed capable of melting everything, smoke billowed, and his momentum was overwhelming. The next moment, his figure suddenly erupted, charging straight out. Accept the judgment of justice. Dog bite Crimson Lotus. The magma arm, carrying terrifying high temperatures, transformed into a ferocious dog head the moment it approached Roxiu. Akainu, having transformed into magma, roared aloud. The ferocious dog head tore through the air, and the pervasive poisonous gas was instantly ignited. Justice? Roxiu sneered internally. Roxiu was not impressed by the Marines' justice. Justice is never something that only exists on one's lips. Buzz, his momentum suddenly soared, and Roxiu's deep eyes looked toward the oncoming magma fist. His figure flashed, avoiding the attack. Meanwhile, the Impel Down Warden's office. Vice Warden Hannibal took out a Den Mushi and dialed the Marineford office. Chapter 98, live broadcast from Impel Down. Hello? This is Marineford, the Marine headquarters. I am Fleet Admiral Sengoku. Inside the Fleet Admiral's office at Marineford, Sengoku picked up the Den Mushi. A panicked and urgent voice came from the Den Den Mushi's mouth. Fleet Admiral, emergency situation inside Impel Down. The heavy convicts on level 6 have rioted. Requesting backup. A riot broke out in Impel Down? And on level 6? Sengoku's expression changed drastically. What happened? As the most impenetrable prison, Impel Down has incarcerated countless notorious convicts over the years, but it has never had any accidents. Forget riots, even the number of people who could sneak in was minuscule. How could a large-scale riot suddenly occur? It's Roxiu. He released all the level 6 prisoners. Hannibal's tone was mixed with fear and helplessness. What? When Sengoku heard those two names, his heart violently clenched. It's him again. Damn it. The situation he least wanted to see has still occurred. This meant that Roxio had truly escaped from Impel Down, and the previous speculation was correct. Where is Magellan? Has he gone there yet? Sengoku suppressed the emotions in his heart and asked in a deep voice. The warden has already arrived, but he was defeated by Roxio. The image of Magellan being brutally beaten by Roxio flashed through Hannibal's mind, and his voice trembled involuntarily. He was defeated. Sengoku frowned deeply. This news was terrible. Magellan's combat strength within Impel Down was extraordinarily high, and his venom fruit could achieve miraculous results in confined spaces. If Roxio could defeat Magellan, it was obvious that he must have been immune to Magellan's devil fruit ability. This made an already tricky situation even more disadvantageous. However, his emotions calmed slightly when he remembered that the two admirals, Kizaru and Akainu, had already headed to Impel Down. Broadcast the current footage of level 6 to headquarters. Reinforcements will be sent. Later. Sengoku hastily hung up the Den Den Mushi, waved his hand, and several marine soldiers guarding the door stepped forward. Summon Vice Admiral Garp and Vice Admiral Tsuru, along with the high-ranking marine officers. There are important matters to discuss. Next, he picked up another Den Den Mushi and called Admiral Akiji, who was executing a mission at a branch near the Calm Belt. The Marineford conference hall quickly filled up. A huge projection screen was hung on the wall inside the hall. Sengoku, wearing frog glasses and a seagull hat, sat in the main seat, his expression grim. Garp, wearing a marine justice cloak and sporting gray hair, was seated beside him. Vice Admiral Tsuru crossed her hands on the table, watching Fleet Admiral Sengoku with sharp eyes, while other marine officers sat near the door. The atmosphere in the hall was somewhat heavy. At this critical juncture, the Fleet Admiral suddenly calling an emergency meeting meant a major incident had certainly occurred. Moreover, judging by Fleet Admiral Sengoku's expression, the major incident seemed highly unfavorable to the Marines. A riot has broken out in Impel Down. Roxiu and the level 6 prisoners are out. Sengoku broke the heavy silence once he saw everyone had arrived. It would have been better if he hadn't spoken, but the moment he did, swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Everyone's gaze instantly focused on the Fleet Admiral of headquarters. There were expressions of surprise, confusion, shock, and, most of all, disbelief. They had expected a major incident to occur. But they never imagined it would be a mass riot by the prisoners of level 6 of Impel Down. And Roxiu was involved again. Bang! Garp slammed his fist onto the table, his face filled with rage. Sengoku, what exactly is going on? Couldn't he just have a few peaceful days? The safest prison, Impel Down. Something actually went wrong there. Vice Admiral Tsuru's eyes were also filled with questions and alarm. Because things seemed to be developing in an uncontrollable direction. At this moment, a marine soldier stepped forward, holding a video Den Den Mushi. Fleet Admiral. Impel Down Vice Warden Hannibal has connected the video Den Den Mushi. Should we project it onto the screen? Sengoku slowly exhaled and nodded. The marine soldier stepped back, placed the video Den Den Mushi on the conference hall table, and began the projection. Sengoku glanced at the crowd, whose emotions were complicated, and continued, Impel Down Vice Warden Hannibal has already called. The situation is confirmed. However, Sakazuki and Borsellino have already headed to Impel Down. There is no need to panic too much. They should be arriving soon. With 2 admirals overseeing the situation, plus Magellan and all the forces, large and small, of Impel Down. It wouldn't be easy for those prisoners to successfully escape from Impel Down. Click. The large screen hanging on the wall lit up, connecting Impel Down, which was several miles away, with Marineford. Some Den Mushi on level 6 that hadn't been destroyed recorded everything that was happening and transmitted it into the view of the high-ranking Marine officers. In the footage, the first things that came into view were a group of prisoners wearing black and white stripes, and the devastated level 6 prison cells. The expressions of the various high-ranking Marine officers were indescribably grim upon seeing this scene. Many of these prisoners were individuals they had personally sent inside. They were extremely dangerous individuals. Their brazen escape from the cells indicated that the order of level 6 had been completely shattered. The situation was even worse than they had imagined. But soon, they noticed something was wrong. Logically, these prisoners, having been locked up for so long, should be cheering and ecstatic upon getting out. But now, they found that the prisoners were terrifyingly quiet, and everyone's gaze was focused in one direction. Following their line of sight, a man stood there, 2 meters tall, with black hair and black eyes. Roxyu. Sengoku looked at the person on the screen and squeezed those 2 words through gritted teeth. The last sliver of hope in his heart vanished. The moment Roxyu appeared, everyone's hearts were cast under a shadow. However, their moods quickly eased because the figures of Sakazuki and Borsellino slowly appeared in the frame next. Admiral Sakazuki. Admiral Borsellino. The appearance of the 2 men slightly alleviated the heavy atmosphere in the hall. With 2 admirals present, plus Warden Magellan, even Roxyu couldn't possibly escape from Impel Down, a Marine officer stated, expressing his opinion. It was 2 admirals who captured Roxyu before, and he believed that facing him again now would surely yield the same result. As long as Roxyu was dealt with, the remaining people would pose little threat. I'm afraid it won't be that simple. Garp offered a differing opinion. Among these prisoners, there are 2 individuals with immense strength. If they cooperate, they have a chance to break out. Sengoku and Vice Admiral Tsuru nodded. As high-ranking personnel who had been active at Marineford since the Rocks era, they naturally knew who Garp was referring to. The Lonely Red and the former Roger Pirates crew member, Bullet. Therefore, I have already ordered Kuzan to head to Impel Down. The purpose of calling this meeting is to discuss how many more troops we need to send for reinforcement. This military suppression must not encounter any further accidents. Chapter 99, The Second Great Demon. Bogart appears. Fleet Admiral Sengoku's words made the hearts of some Marine generals tighten. Admiral Kuzan was actually also rushing to Impel Down. Good heavens! The 3 admirals of Marineford were about to gather in Impel Down. Since the Rocks era, the Great Pirate era had begun. They had never seen such a grand scene. And in addition to that, more personnel were to be dispatched to support Impel Down. It seemed a major event was about to happen. Garp and Vice Admiral Tsuru nodded, agreeing with Fleet Admiral Sengoku's decision. Facing Roxyu, they had to suppress him with the strongest possible force. From their encounters with Roxyu during this period, they deeply understood one thing. Roxyu was not only powerful but also very cunning. As his opponent, they could not afford to be careless or have any wishful thinking. After deliberation, Fleet Admiral Sengoku finally decided on the reinforcements. A total of 6 Marine Headquarters Vice Admirals, 9 Marine Headquarters Rear Admirals, 15 Marine Headquarters warships, and 20,000 Marine soldiers. When these numbers were announced, some of the high-ranking generals present couldn't help but gasp. The Marine soldier standing next to the video Den Mushi couldn't help but shiver, wiping the sweat from his forehead. It should be known that even a Marineford buster call only consisted of 10 warships, 5 Vice Admirals, and Marine elite forces. To still dispatch so many troops even with 3 admirals already present showed how much Fleet Admiral Sengoku valued Roxyu. After Fleet Admiral Sengoku gave his orders, the personnel responsible for executing the plan immediately left the meeting hall. Fleet Admiral, actually, there's no need to be too pessimistic. With 3 admirals and Magellan present, Roxiu will most likely be apprehended ahead of schedule, said Cake, an admiral candidate wearing slippers and a top hat, optimistically. Many others shared his view. I hope so. Fleet Admiral Sengoku nodded. Logically speaking, things should indeed unfold as Cake said. With 3 admirals, plus Magellan, whose combat power in Impel Down was not inferior to an admiral, and all the forces throughout Impel Down, the overall combat power to stop this riot was actually more than sufficient. But for some reason, his eyelids kept twitching, and his heart remained restless. Perhaps it was because of the recently appeared Bogard? Perhaps it was because Roxiu might possess unknown strength? Fleet Admiral Sengoku couldn't be sure. Vice Admiral Garp and Vice Admiral Tsuru were just as uncertain as he was. The 3 looked at each other, seeing a hint of unease in each other's eyes. At this moment, the screen hanging on the wall suddenly shook. Everyone's gaze shifted, looking collectively at the situation inside Impel Down. On the screen. After Roxiu dodged Kizaru's attack again, he landed to the side. Roxiu! Are you scared? Akainu twisted his neck, sneering as he watched Roxiu use his speed to dodge his attacks without fighting back. He said that, but in his heart, he was pondering a thing or two. Based on past experience, Roxiu was not a coward. Recalling the first time he fought Roxiu, he had reason to suspect this guy was plotting something again. In the corridor, magma burst, melting the stones. Roxiu dodged it. Some prisoners, however, suffered. Damn it, what's wrong with Roxiu? Facing 2 admirals, is he scared? How can he escape from Impel Down like this? He doesn't even have the courage to attack an admiral, damn it. The convicts on level 6 were still hoping that Roxiu could hold back the 2 admirals so they could escape in the chaos. Unexpectedly, Roxiu, who had just been hammering Magellan on the ground, had actually chickened out. However, unlike their reaction, Fleet Admiral Sengoku of Marineford felt his heart skip a beat as he watched the situation. No! Something's wrong. Fleet Admiral, what's wrong? What did you see? Some generals asked puzzledly, not knowing what Fleet Admiral Sengoku was referring to. Fleet Admiral Sengoku didn't reply, his eyes still fixed on the screen. Inside, Roxiu stood firm, ignoring Akainu's words with disdain. Want to fight me? First, get past him. As he spoke, he raised his arm, then slammed it down fiercely. Boom! It was as if heavenly thunder had exploded. From above, a huge shadow was cast down, obscuring everyone's vision and re-enveloping the already dim level 6 in darkness. Following that was a piercing laugh, accompanied by the sound of licking lips. A behemoth fell from the hole in level 5, slamming heavily onto the corridor of level 6. Creak! The flagstones shattered into dust, and the prison cells were crushed and deformed. Some heavy convicts didn't even have time to react before they were squashed into meat paste by a sitting butt. What is this? Why would such a creature appear in Impel Down? Is it a Sea King? Once their vision cleared, some heavy convicts' faces were filled with shock and confusion as they looked at the green-skinned creature, whose body was wider than the level 6 corridor. The Lonely Red, Bullet, Crocodile, and others also looked at this monster with flickering eyes. They also didn't understand what had happened. But from the aura emanating from this green-skinned monster, they could tell that it was definitely not a Sea King. It was incredibly oppressive. A very troublesome fellow. Bogard! How did this monster get here? Akainu and Kizaru felt their scalps tingle the moment they saw Bogard. They were both shocked and puzzled. How did this Bogard get in? The outside of Impel Down was practically an iron fortress. Such a massive creature moving around couldn't possibly leave no trace. But soon, the two thought of the crucial point. It was Roxiu. Thinking of Roxiu being with Bogard before, combined with what he just said, Roxiu must have used some strange technique. At this thought, Kizaru and Akainu exchanged glances. This meant Bogard was truly the second great demon. Roxiu. Bogard is the second of the 8 great demons, isn't he? Don't think you can hide it from the Marines. Akainu looked at Roxiu, his voice low and muffled. These words made the prisoners on level 6 even more confused. Bogard? 8. Great demons? The second one? All were unfamiliar terms. Only Crocodile, who had fought Roxiu, realized the key. He. I get it, I finally get it. So the Marines were hunting Roxiu because of the demons. The 8 great demons are what they fear. Recalling the events in the Alabasta Kingdom, Crocodile understood why Admiral Kizaru had secretly pursued Roxiu that day and why he had been thrown into Impel Down. It was to cover up the secret. Behind Roxiu was a force more powerful than any 4 Emperor crews. Bullet and the Lonely Red, Shiryu of the Rain who had killed the jailers, and some prisoners whose strength was second only to theirs, all frowned and looked at Crocodile. You understand again? Chapter 100, Hard. So hard. Roxiu, standing to the side, looked at Akainu and sneered, so what if it is? You should worry about the current situation first. As his voice fell, Roxiu tapped the ground with his toe, leaped up, and landed on Bogard's shoulder. It is said that standing on the shoulders of a giant allows one to see further, and this view is indeed correct. He reached out and patted Bogard. These 2 people are full of flesh and blood, they are great nourishment. It's up to you to show me what you've got. Schlurp. Bogard licked his tongue upon hearing this. He. Then I won't hold back. His large eyes, like red lanterns, stared intently at Kizaru and Akainu. Kizaru and Akainu's expressions changed. It can actually talk. It is certainly a demon. They blindly attributed all these incomprehensible phenomena to the word demon. Don't take this lightly. Anyone worthy of the word demon must have extraordinary strength. Kizaru said gravely. Akainu naturally understood. Dog bite Crimson Lotus. A loud roar rang out. His arm instantly transformed into scorching magma and blasted toward Bogard's enormous body. Rolling thick smoke dispersed and rose up. The speed was extreme, and in the blink of an eye, he arrived in front of Bogard. The magma fist, possessing enough penetrating power to pierce Whitebeard, struck with a loud crash. Bogard neither dodged nor retreated, taking Akainu's punch with his body. However, the expected scene of magma burning through flesh did not occur. Only Akainu's expression of disbelief appeared. What's going on? He was utterly confused. His fist clearly landed on Bogard's huge body, but the magma fist seemed to have hit a reinforced sea stone, unable to penetrate at all. For Akainu, who possesses extremely strong offensive power and explosive force, this was the first time he had encountered such a situation. Unbelievable. The technique that had always been effective was useless. Just how hard was Bogard's body? Watch out. Just as Akainu was starting to doubt his life, Bogard raised his hand and struck. He slapped his arm hard against his stomach. Like swatting a fly, he intended to slap Akainu to death. Boom! Akainu reacted and rapidly retreated backward. Ama no Murakumo sword. In the gap between Bogard's attacks, a dazzling light flashed in Kizaru's hand, and a light sword taller than himself materialized. Whoosh! Immediately after, a sharp sound of air being torn rang out. Kizaru transformed into a beam of light and rushed straight toward Bogard. He raised the light sword high and then viciously chopped downwards. Clang! The sound of metal colliding suddenly appeared. The light sword struck Bogard, splashing a field of starlight. But the result was no different from Akainu's. It barely managed to break the skin, failing to cause any substantial damage. Damn it! Seeing his attack fail, Kizaru raised his hand and chopped down with another sword strike. Bang! Bogard's palm slammed onto the light sword, and the immense force injected into it directly smacked Kizaru's body into the prison wall. Broken stones instantly buried him. Rumble! Kizaru got up, shaking off the debris on his body. What immense strength! Kizaru muttered. If he hadn't elementalized his body, that slap would have knocked his gallbladder out. Meanwhile, on the other side, inside Marineford. Crack! Sengoku, witnessing everything on level 6, had his pupils contract violently. A cup he was holding fell to the ground, shattered into pieces. Something unexpected, yet reasonable, had happened. Bogard, the second great demon, had actually appeared in Impel Down. Moreover, his strength was terrifying. Garp's expression also changed drastically. He completely failed to understand how Bogard's massive body had suddenly appeared inside Impel Down. But he knew that Roxyu must have been pulling strings behind the scenes. Thud! Garp tore off the great cloak on his back and slapped it onto the conference table. Fleet Admiral Sengoku, I request permission to go to Impel Down. His voice, like rolling thunder, resonated in everyone's hearts. Everyone's gaze turned toward the hero of the Marines. They naturally knew why Garp would make such a request at this time. The attacks of the two admirals could not break Bogard's defense. The balance of power was severely tilting. If, before this, they had held great expectations for arresting Roxyu, then after Roxyu brought Bogard here, that expectation instantly plummeted to rock bottom. Absolutely not. Before Sengoku could speak, Vice Admiral Tsuru shot down the idea. Marineford has already dispatched 3 admirals, along with a host of Marine Headquarters vice admirals and rear admirals. Such a mighty army will inevitably attract the attention of others. Currently, Marineford's high-level combat power is severely lacking. If pirate crews unite and seize the opportunity to attack Marineford, the consequences would be unimaginable. This worry was not unfounded. On the sea, Roxyu was not the only force opposing the Marines. Those great pirates who wished they could grind Marineford to dust have always been watching Marineford closely, draining the combat power of the headquarters at this time. There is a high probability that pirate forces will unite and take the opportunity to seize Marineford. Vice Admiral Tsuru's worries are possible. Sengoku dismissed the soldiers cleaning the floor and rubbed his aching temples. Indeed, someone must remain stationed at Marineford. Although the current situation is terrible, but there is still a chance. Kuzan is still en route, and the main force is rushing there. Bogard has powerful physical attributes. His strength is also good, but it's clear his speed is not fast. After multiple rounds of bombardment, his defense might be broken. Let's put our faith in Sakazuki and the others, inside Impel Down's level 6. Explosions, shouts, and impacts rose and fell continuously. The battle between Bogard and the two admirals had spread from level 6 to the entirety of Impel Down. The Crimson Hell, the Starvation Hell, the Burning Hell, the Freezing Hell, and even the New Kamo Land, all experienced severe unrest. The jailer beasts, chief guards, and jailers were deployed en masse to suppress the biggest riot in history. The prisoners in level 6 twitched their faces and stared at Bogard, whose body had burst through level 6, and Roxyu, swallowing nervously. After listening to Crocodile, this self-proclaimed expert, they deeply realized the terror of the organization behind Roxyu. Just one Bogard was enough to restrain 2 admirals, and there were actually 6 more guys like him. Never mind Marineford, even they, pirates who were not directly opposed to Roxyu, felt a chill rise from the soles of their feet, like a poisonous snake crawling up their spine and shooting straight to their forehead. What kind of organization could hide so many admiral-level powerhouses? They could now fully understand why the Marines wanted to secretly kill Roxyu. This was information that could shock the entire sea. Go! Leave this place during the chaos. Now is the perfect chance. Among the many prisoners, a man with a scar on his face said, his eyes flashing with sharp light. Bogard restrained the 2 admirals, and Magellan was injured, posing little threat for now. Now was the perfect opportunity to escape. The moment this thought arose, his aura surged, and his figure flashed, rushing toward the end of the unguarded corridor. But just as he rushed out, an even faster figure caught up. Crunch! He raised his hand, twisted the man's neck, and threw him aside. That's it for today. Meet you in next part.